call. Ms. Alfonso Wells.
Present.
Mr. Miser.
Here.
Mr. Price.
Here.
Ms. Salisbury.
Here.
Ms. Scales.
Here.
Ms. Stribling.
Here.
Mayor Schwartzwelder.
Here.
And I am likewise here. Let's move to item 3, which is public comment. And we have 8 individuals that are going to be giving public comment this evening. The first is Mark Wagner regarding the condition of the road at Mansion Place. So Mark, if you want to unmute and go ahead, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Back in February, I brought to council the state of our street. And to my understanding, after speaking with Mr. Batchy afterwards, his work was to begin either late spring, early summer. And I contacted him back and found out that absolutely nothing was done since February to even begin to address this problem. And I know that I then spoke with Chris about this. So, but the fact is nothing was done, which is the most, disconcerting, because, I fully expected something late spring, early summer, and then come to learn nothing was being done.
Mr. Wagner, do you mind just, I know you and I spoke on the phone about this, but do you mind just giving a brief refresher to the other council members of what the concern is on Mansion Place?
Well, we've had multiple, I've been here over 16 years, and we've had so many water main breaks, I can't even count the number. That has caused significant damage to our street, where the concrete is sinking in places, cracks everywhere that are, really dangerous, both for people walking. We've had one neighbor break her foot trying to cross the street. An elderly neighbor that, slipped on the fact that there was a large crack going across and lost her footing. So it's really been a huge issue. Even people driving down, they finally actually around the one manhole cover put some asphalt because the concrete was rocking. I mean, we were afraid that we were going to fall through at some point. And that actually had to be reported more recently by a number of neighbors, not myself, before that was rectified.
Great. Well, are there any additional comments you want to make about this with your time, Mr. Wagner?
Just hoping, I know that you said that it's to move forward. It would be nice to know when we're going to see some action.
Well, we will have during the DPW report, we'll have them comment on that as part of the report.
Great, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. All right, next we have Johan Guldenschuh for the parklet.
Okay. All right, good evening. I saw that the discussion for pollinator parklet was on the agenda for tonight, and wanted to add my voice once again to those of other Swissvale residents in showing support for this project. I believe that it would be in the best interest of the community to have a progressive and ecologically friendly space in what has been an eyesore for years. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your comments. We'll stick with the parklet theme. Madeline Dussault.
Hello. I wanted to speak in favor of the parklet in part because we used to have a nice stand of milkweed at the site of the old GRA home, but that was all cut down, and monarch butterflies rely on milkweed as the place where they lay their eggs. So if there isn't any milkweed allowed around, they won't lay their eggs, and there won't be a new generation of monarch butterflies. So to support the monarch butterflies, having this parklet and having milkweed in it could be a really big asset.
Great. Thank you very much for your comments, Ms. Dussault. Next on the list would be Ms. Sarah Crutchfield. Looks like she's still having some trouble, so we'll circle back on her. After her, we have Mr. Seth Bush to speak about the parklet.
Hey there. My name's Seth. I live on Woodstock Ave. I'm also a member of the Climate Action Committee with Sean Alfonso Wells. We're working on a climate action plan for our borough. I know you've already heard from a lot of folks who are in favor of the pollinator garden and this proposal, and like them, I think it's a win-win opportunity. Obvious proposal to say yes to, but wanted to offer a little tidbit of information that you might be interested in that you probably haven't heard about yet, which is that our Climate Action Committee, as we've developed this plan, we surveyed 342 Swissvale residents about their concerns related to climate change and what they'd like to see done about it. And the number one item that people were interested in is to convert vacant lots to green areas where neighbors can gather, grow food, and kids can play. And the third most popular action after doing something about air quality, and this is out of many possible actions, the third most popular is invest in trees, green roofs, and more green spaces to absorb carbon dioxide and reduce heat in the summer and to support our local ecosystem. So accepting this proposal for a pollinator garden is really a way to give people what they want and make Swissvale more resilient to climate change in the long term. And really, I think it could inspire many more pollinator-friendly green spaces in Swissvale's future as folks learn about what they are and what they can do for our community. I mean, on the really hot days, they could provide shade and places for people to be cool. When we have really intense storms, a pollinator garden could help with some of our stormwater runoff and flooding issues because it helps to integrate that water into the soil instead of just running off. So you can read more about the climate action plan and our numerous goals. There's 4 in particular that this checks off. So you can take a look at that at your own time, but would be a huge boon to have this program already underway as we get the climate action plan finalized, to be able to say, look, we're already doing things that check off the box here. And I also wanted to make a plug. I think the 7700 block of Edgewood Ave makes a lot of sense for where to put it. It's a great way to welcome people to the borough. There aren't many other green spaces in that area. It's accessible. And again, siting it there would really improve stormwater runoff. Right now, that is an area that rainwater falls and then just washes onto Braddock Ave. If you drive along that area often, sometimes on heavy storm days, we get gravel and rocks and debris washed into the street. So having a green space there would prevent that from happening, especially as with a warming climate, we can expect to see more frequent and intense storms. I know there's some deliberation about where best to put this location. There are some other spots to put it, like Church and Braddock near the town center, but the 7700 block would be a huge deal for us. Putting it anywhere else would be converting a green space into another green space, whereas this location would be converting a gray gravel lot into a green space. And it seems like the Humane Action Group is willing to invest the resources to turn something that is a gray space into a green space instead of just updating an existing green space. So I think it's just a real win to say yes to this proposal. I hope y'all will make the right choice. A vote to approve putting a pollinator garden there. It just makes sense. I hope if you still need to deliberate, you'll at least give the certainty to this organization, vote to say, yep, we're going to do this no matter what. We're going to put this somewhere in Swissvale. Give them the certainty that they need, the confidence that, yep, we're willing to partner with them. Maybe work with them a little bit more to find the best location if you need to do that. But I would say move forward with this, give them the certainty that you're willing to move forward, even if you still need to figure out the best spot. And 7700 block of Edgewood Ave just makes a lot of sense. And I hope this is the beginning of many pollinator gardens to come. So thanks so much for considering this closely.
Thank you. Thanks for those comments. All right, let's move to Bonnie Spoles, who wants to speak general comments about interactions of council and citizens.
Hi. We have a lot of brilliant and accomplished members of council, but that's not enough to understand and run a borough. It seems that you rely on the same people who have harmed the borough for insight into how the borough works. I'm happy to reach out to other successful boroughs to see how work is accomplished. Both Millville and Etna have green designations for the state. In fact, both of those are number 1 and 2 in the state. They've both turned their years of decay into something so much better. Swissvale has many accomplished and willing citizens, taxpayers, and general people to help with borough business. All walks of life are represented. Yet council chooses not to ask for help and collaborate with the community. Sean Alfonso Wells is the only person asking for help. Last month, it was made clear that borough residents need not help, only council members. There was a comment made that I take umbrage with. Borough residents see this as council setting up an us-them scenario where you don't care what we think and you don't want our input. Then you whine about having so much work to do all alone while doing what it is that you want, taxpayer input ignored. The sensing sessions that were held a few years ago were a great way to get input. They were held at the school on the other side of the parkway. It would be nice to solicit input from the community because every decision you make affects each and every one of the taxpayers. So I'm willing to put some time into this. And let's follow the examples of successful boroughs instead of letting ours continue down the same ruinous path that it has been for decades. We can really do this. And I know the community is interested in helping. I'm retired. My cousin's the mayor of Millvale. He said to reach out to him at any time and use us. We want this to be a collaborative effort for the entire community. Thanks.
Could I ask a quick question, just because I think my internet's a little sketchy? She said something about across the parkway was useful, but I didn't hear what it was.
She said this. Yeah, go
That
ahead.
was the school that's on across the parkway.
Yeah.
What is it? The other part of Regent Square.
Yeah.
That's where we had the sensing session last time.
Yeah.
And that was just really wonderful. You got great input. I met some wonderful community people. I even contributed to their work because we don't know everything that's going on. And it was a wonderful way to interact with borough council members and borough residents. Use us. We're here to be used.
Thanks. Sorry, that was just my audio skipped out. I think it was my internet, so I didn't hear.
Great. Thank you for those comments. Let's move to Joel Rosenthal, who wants to speak about the parklet. Joel, can you hear us? All right, we'll circle back to him. Joel, if you, I see you're on here and muted. Hopefully we'll come back to you after this last public comment. We'll stick with the parklet. Michelle Worth, are you able to give your comments now?
Yep. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. I wanted to start by thanking our administrator, Sarah Anzel, for making sure I got what I needed to participate in the meeting tonight. So I think we are all on the same page that we need pollinators in order to have food. That right now imported honeybees pollinate about 80% of our crops across the country. We're short about 20%, and there's been an increase in colony collapse. There is agreement among experts that native pollinators are what will come to the rescue. And so we need to create more pesticide-free spaces for pollinators. So we know that native pollinators are a must-have for an agricultural community, but their gardening, agriculture is an important part of Swissvale's community. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because it's only about pollinators to the extent that it's about us. I have a favorite Swissvale Borough Council meeting, and it is the one in which Leland Scales got up and spoke asking for the first community garden, the Borough Council. And what I learned from Leland is that his family had been here for, I think, over 100 years, 4 generations. And that blew my mind. And he made some really great points about the importance of gardening and maintaining that quality that has drawn so many of us who weren't born here to make this place home. And that is just the opportunity to connect with neighbors, to nourish ourselves, to nourish one another, to have something that we can share our excitement about that is really just healthy and nourishing. And that kind of casual, relaxing contact, the opportunity for serendipity to get to know one another is really important to the fabric of a community. Leland was talking about growing up here at a time where if you acted out, everybody knew your mama and she was going to hear about it, right? But that required people to be outside just casually whenever you were there being a kid doing what kids do. And as an adult, I have to say that sharing gardening stuff with my neighbors has been the closest thing I have to a community playground, to get to know people that I don't meet on the bus or at work. And the internet has made it even better, right? Because we can share seedlings and information. I've learned so much from Miranda, who lives up the hill. Like, my wife and I bought a house on the flat part of town. We do not want to walk up that hill, but I'll go up that hill to see what Miranda is growing and to hear about her seedlings, and to help my neighbor Judy take down her bamboo. Like, at this rate, Judy is going to meet everyone in Swissvale by the time we're all done helping her take out a chunk of that bamboo. And I just can't stress how important that opportunity is at a time when things can seem really fraught. Yeah, so what else is there? I hope that this, I want to go back to the location. What I like about the current proposed location is that it gives us an opportunity to show one of the things that we love best about our community on our own terms, because that is very close to the busway. A lot of people from many different neighborhoods are going to pass that spot, and they're going to see about us one of the things that a lot of us love about our community, which is that we are a connected community and we love gardening. So I hope that it is the first of many, because as Seth pointed out, there is more than one viable location. And for the reasons Seth stated, I think that the proposed location is the best first start, in part because it gives so many people an opportunity to learn about the importance of pesticide-free spaces for pollinators, which is important for us, and to engage in and learn about gardening from wherever they are, even if they don't yet have their own yard and their own garden. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. All right, I see Joel Rosenthal. I can see him on the screen now. Joel, can you hear me? You are muted right now.
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, I unfortunately just got back, so I didn't really hear what anybody else said. But to me, it's anytime you get a no-cost way to beautify your municipality and help the environment all at the same time, it just seems like a no-brainer. That's really all I got to say.
Great, thank you for those comments.
Great, thanks.
Sarah Crutchfield, has she been able to get on? Doesn't look like it. So Sarah Ansel, have you heard anything back from her?
I have not. I've emailed her and tried to chat her as well, but I don't know. She's still trying to, it still says trying to connect to audio. So I don't think she's available to chat just yet.
Okay. Well, I know her comments had to do with potholes in the roads and pavement. And so let's, I mean, I know we're closing our public comment. I mean, depending on if she is able to get on, we might be able to squeeze her in somewhere. But if not, maybe you can follow up with her via email and see if she can at least submit an email of where her concerns are, those locations, and we can make sure that all of council sees that information.
Absolutely, sure thing.
Great. All right, well, let's move to our agenda items. We have, looks like 7 things that we'll be discussing. The first of which is item A, discuss ratification of an agreement with Cargill to supply salt through the Shaycog Purchasing Alliance for the 2022 to 23 winter season. Mr. Batchey, can you speak on this?
Yes. We were under a 5-year contract with Cargill. We participate in the Shaycog multi-municipal bidding program, and the Shaycog bids out about 450 to 475,000 tons a year of salt. So that's probably the best rate we're going to get, because our 1,200 tons, we're going to pay a premium for it. So we've participated in this for at least 10 years. This last 5-year contract expired at the end of June, and Shaycog put it out for bid. The low bidder once again was Cargill at a rate of $88.96 a ton. The bid price last year was $78.82. But there's a fuel cost adjustment in there, so it did end up at about $81 a ton by the end of winter. With diesel up right now, I think it was $5.75 is what they based the bid on. So if diesel continues to decline, then the price of per ton of $88.96 a ton will go down. And then it resets to $88.96 a ton next year. And this is a 5-year contract. So resets to $88.96, and then the fuel factors into it every year. But we would be approving for 2022-2023 winter season only. We have to ratify it every year beyond that of the 5-year contract. And Cargill does have the option to drop out of the contract each year, but then Shaycog would rebid it and see if there were any other bidders interested. There were 2 bidders on this. Initially, there was one, but then they found that they lost the other bid, but it didn't make a difference in the bidding. When they found it, the price of the other bidder was higher. So what we'll be asking next week is council to approve the contract with Cargill for the 2022-2023 winter season at $88.96 a ton.
Thanks. Any comments or questions, discussion from council? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I brought this up in the past, but I don't know if we've ever actually seriously investigated the possibility of using something other than salt, or something in combination with salt. And I mean, I've brought up before in the past the idea that some places I know use beet juice concentrate, and there's mag flakes and other things, sand. I know some places mix in to try to diminish the salt use. I bring that up because I know we have a lot of people in Swissvale who are very interested in green initiatives. You know, we talked about the climate action plan and so forth. And I just wonder if there's something that we can use that's an alternative to salt. I recognize that salt is probably the cheapest, easiest option, but sometimes what's cheapest and easiest isn't really the best for the environment because of the runoff afterwards.
We have never used anything but salt. They tried using brine before my tenure here. But the problem with brine is to make it work right, you have to have a big container for it. You have to actually make your own brine rather than have it delivered. One of the problems with brine is it is salt-based product, and once again, it's more corrosive than the actual straight salt is. The beet juice is actually very corrosive to vehicles, both the vehicle applying it to the road as well as the vehicles driving on it. Even though it's a natural product, it's actually highly corrosive to vehicles. And once again, you know, we would have to make a large investment in a tank and a storage system for it. So for 2022, I mean, the options are limited, but if it's something council wants to explore, you know, we could do a detailed analysis on this for, you know, for future years. But right now, there's really not many products out there besides salt. I mean, I know the residents of our town also like, you know, they also like their wet roads in the winter, and you know, rather than snow covered, and salt's about the best way to achieve that.
I mean, I think Ms. Salisbury brings up some good things to look into. I mean, I don't know if we're going to solve this necessarily in this time, but perhaps that can be one of the tasks for our new DPW director, to see if there are, just to do a little research to see if there are something that could wean us off. Maybe not completely, but to be a little bit more of that green initiative, like you said.
It just does concern me because we have so much runoff. I know I've spoken with Mr. Bacci before about the amount of runoff that we have and the alerts that go on when the excessive runoff sort of creates an alert because it goes into our waterways. So I want to not be running off, you know, brine and salt and so forth into our waterways if there's a way that we can avoid it. And I know it's one of those things where sometimes you just aren't set up for that. You know, we're set up to buy salt from the COG and distribute it from our salt trucks, and it's the easiest, cheapest way to go, but I would like it if we could look into some other options. If they turn out to not be viable, then that's totally understandable, but just, you know, I would like to be aware of if there are other options for us.
Great. Any other comments?
Just wanted to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So it looks like the rate is about $10 a ton higher than it was last year. So given that we're looking at a usage of approximately 1,200 tons, it would be an increase of, is my math right, $10,000 over what we spent last year?
Yes. We finished last year at about $81 a ton. So, you know, it's about an $8 increase over that. So for over what we were paying, you know, it's going to be about $9,600 a year over what we spent last year.
Okay.
And hopefully if gas does go down,
Yeah.
our, you know, that rate will change for us as well, will decrease, as to Mr. Batchy's point earlier.
Yeah, if diesel drops, the price of the price changes every month, based upon the price of the diesel.
And I totally understand that the volume purchase that, you know, the COG can do keeps the price lower. Are there other, just understanding any other options? I mean, are there any other COGs that neighboring municipalities use, or do most of the other municipalities use this same COG to get their salt?
Almost everyone uses the Shea COG, participates in it. That's how they get that 450,000 tons, or you know, between 450 and 475.
Thank you.
Mr. Batchy, how many, when we had spoken earlier about this, I forgot to ask this, how many tons fit in our current salt bin?
About 250 to 275.
Okay, and how much each year is 1,200 about what we use? I mean, I know that seasons kind of changed that, but it seems like we had salt left over from this past winter. Would that potentially decrease the amount that we would need to draw from the Shea COG, or are we committed to buying 1,200?
We're committed to buying 960 tons if we go with the 1,200. We use around 1,400 tons annually. So I put in for 1,200 because the salt building is full. So that would give us about 1,450 tons. Under this contract, you have to buy 80% of what you put in for. So that would obligate us to 960 tons. And if we have a terrible winter where it goes over, we can buy the same up to 125% of the 1,200 tons, so 1,500 tons at the same rate.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments? All right, let's move to item B, discuss the creation of a public works superintendent position and the appointment of an individual to serve in that position.
When we went through the hiring process to hire Mr. D'Ambrosio as the Public Works Director, we talked about adding another union level supervisory position above a foreman, because we have two foremen now, and what we talked about was moving one of them to a higher level position. And I had circulated the job description to everyone a few weeks ago, and the job description that I would propose, the title is Public Works Superintendent. And basically what that person would be, it would be a current union member who works here, and he would be responsible for helping train the new employees and helping existing employees refine the processes and procedures that they do, look at some of the things we do, see how we can do them better, and just spend time making sure everybody has the proper knowledge, training, and tools and equipment to do their job, and spend a couple hours a day on that. And then the rest of the day, they would spend working with the crew and actually physically doing work and working with the guys and helping them. So this would be a two-part motion. If this is something you would want to do next week, it would be the first to create the position, and second to appoint a second motion to appoint an individual to serve in that position.
Great, thanks. Are there questions from council?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. I think that this position is really necessary because it helps to definitely give options to our union workers in terms of moving up in the job and not being caught at a ceiling. So I think that was something that needed to be redressed. in terms of the structure that we have previously had in place. And so I think it's an important position for us to have.
Mr. Batchey, where do we anticipate being with the union for this position? Have they, I can't remember, we talked about this, but I can't remember if they are aware of it or if that job description has been given to them.
Job description has been shared with them. I had a discussion with the union steward and the union president concerning it, and they are in favor of it. They're always in favor of their people moving up and doing better.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's move to item C, discussion regarding securing a towing company for defined services. So Ms. Scales, do you want to, as chair of the police committee, introduce this one for us?
Yes. So it has been brought to our attention from residents that have been subject to legal tows in terms of the fees associated with getting their cars back being pretty high. So taking into consideration the feedback that we received from our residents, we started having ongoing discussions on what can we do to minimize that impact. And Chief performed research that I shared with you all yesterday by email. I don't know if you guys had the chance to look at it, but that research, in addition to Colgan Towing, it has other tow companies in the area and what their going rates are, so that we can have a bigger picture understanding of what are some of the options that are out there. And so taking in consideration that research that was received and the ongoing discussions in terms of what can we do to minimize the impact is why we now want to bring it to the attention of council in terms of if we want to entertain having a discussion with one of these tow companies about going into an agreement to provide tow services for us. I know that you all received an agreement from Mr. McTiernan, and I want to let you guys know now that I did not approve of that. And let me be very clear for Mr. McTiernan, so no one gets upset about Mr. McTiernan and thinking that he did something that he wasn't asked to do. I specifically asked for no one to ask Mr. McTiernan to draw up any agreement because I wanted to have a discussion with all of council about this, because this is a discussion. No decisions have been made and no sit downs have happened with any of these tow companies about any interest to entertain an agreement with them. I wanted all of council to be aware of the research that has been done, of the discussions that have been had, to get an understanding from council if we want to entertain this as a possibility. In addition to that, I wanted to do this, of course, in a public setting so that our public, if there are any sort of concerns, feedback that they want to provide, that can also be taken into consideration. So I want to, for one, if there was some level of confusion that happened because you received that, I apologize for that, even though I don't know what took place, that is what you guys were presented with, because that is not the stage that we are at. This is just mere discussion. And I want to make sure that these discussions are very much transparent to council and the community before any sit downs take place with anybody about this idea. So what are your thoughts on considering going into an agreement with a tow company for tow services in effort to reduce the financial impact to individuals whose cars are towed.
Well, let me ask first, if we entered into a contract, would we be able to negotiate? Do you think it's reasonable that we'd be able to negotiate a lower price than what is advertised?
That we don't know. We do not know that if we go into, because we have not sat down with the tow company yet. And I specifically did not want that to happen because I felt like that is taking action without being transparent in the discussions that are taking place. I don't want to put that filler out that Swissvale Borough wants to sit down and have a discussion about a contract with you, and you guys have no idea in terms of this is even happening. So we do not know if any of these tow companies would be willing to reduce the cost, but that's the goal. That's the goal, that if we sit down, we have a conversation with them in terms of going into an agreement to exclusively, use them, that what will happen is that there will be a difference in fees for folks whose cars are towed by us.
Some of the other boroughs in the area do have towing agreements with various towing companies, and some of the same towing companies that we've been shown prices of. We on the police committee think that it would be a good idea to have some uniformity in how our residents are charged. And when your car is towed, you don't get to any consumer choices. You don't get to shop around on who's going to tow you and what they're going to charge. And so, we just want to make sure that our residents are treated fairly and uniformly.
I saw on the list that was sent around that there were 2 types of fees that I think should be negotiated. I think that's a good way to start, but I looked and it looked like all of the different companies had slightly different ways in which they were, in which they marked their fees, right? So one is the initial pickup and what kind of pickup it is. And there was a variety of prices. I mean, the difference between them was probably, on the low end, you had regardless, it was still pretty high for someone who, especially for people who might be living paycheck to paycheck. I'm not necessarily living paycheck to paycheck, but I looked at those fees and I would definitely not want to get my car towed because it was like, wow, that's a little bit of an unexpected expense. And so that's the first part of the fee. And it depended, I think, on whether or not it was just a simple removal, whether or not there had been a major accident that happened with it, or whether it was like a small accident, or whether it was just being removed for some type of infraction on the road or in parking. And then the second fee is the fee of them keeping your car, one would say incarcerating your car, in the lot. Right. And so that also had different fees attached to it. And I do believe that since the residents don't usually have an option as to, which company is going to tow their car, we should probably look into it and see if we can come up with a contract that would make it at least a little bit more reasonable. Those rates were pretty high. If your car stays there for more than if it stays there for a couple of hours, it looks like you're paying upwards to, almost $300, even at the lowest price, right? So the lowest price of the pickup fee plus the rental space fee, so to speak, was just about $300. So if we could bring that down or find a way in which we can, because mind you, they'd be getting a contractual relationship with us where we would be calling them, right? And that includes any random accidents that go on the parkway or on our streets, or, anytime someone's being towed for other purposes. So I think we should probably look into that and get some numbers. and not just give any one person a contract without, really thinking about what that contract is going to entail. And I think deep in my soul, I do like to bargain and try to see what would be the best price we could get instead of just accepting whatever their list price is. And also, if we could have, the prices listed out on the Borough site, that would be nice, because then someone would get towed or whatever and could look it up and say, oh my God, I need to, sell my leg or my kidney because this price is really high, or, donate blood, whatever it is. Oh, you're not donating it. Sell my blood, because those prices were pretty high. And I can just imagine that it would be a sticker shock. So we definitely want to make sure that we are thinking about that seriously, and that we put all the thoughts and efforts that we can into that, so we can get the price down and at least see what our options are, so that if we're going to give somebody a contract, we have, the best interest of our citizens in mind.
What brought this, Josh?
I was just going to say, for clarification, the one thing that I kind of keep coming back to is currently we use Colgan. The Borough of Swissvale uses Colgan, and exclusively Colgan, from what I understand. So what is the financial incentive for Colgan if we would enter into an agreement with them, since they already are our exclusive provider?
We could go with whatever that one was out in North Sales, which has better prices. So it's the incentive would be that they wouldn't lose that exclusive option.
And we don't have to go with Colgan.
Right. No, I understand that. But basically just saying we'll commit to are we looking to commit it to a time period, like a length of contract? Okay.
So I
That
think
would be more, that would
problem
make
is
sense.
that Colgan's name is being, or whatever, some name is being mentioned in the contract. I don't think we should have a name at all at this point, because we haven't looked at it. So I know they're the ones that we have been using, but one of the reasons why this issue came up is because of the exorbitant fees that people seem to be paying in our neighborhood for whatever.
Yeah, and just
I don't know.
the
I
one
don't know
other,
why they're the only ones that are being called. There are cheaper options.
the one other question I had, and then Bill, sorry, is if as a citizen you're involved in an accident, it's been several years since I've been in an accident, do you not have the ability to contact, if you're in an like if I'm in an accident out on Braddock, can I call whatever towing company I want to come tow my car if it's not drivable? Or am I required to use what the police, and Chief, maybe you can answer that, because I heard that kind of alluded to, that there was no choice in the matter. And I understand for violations, the police department uses their towing service, but in an accident situation, is there any choice for the resident?
Well, our position is if somebody calls a private tow, our only issue is the time it takes for that private tow to get there. We do not preclude people from calling a private tow if their vehicle is disabled in an accident, only when it will take hours to clear the traffic. So like if somebody's in an accident and they get their car off the roadway and it's legally parked and they call a private tow, we won't tow their vehicle because it's not obstructing traffic. So, I mean, it's a case by case basis.
But if it's sitting in the middle of Braddock and it's going to be there for 8 hours, then you're going to just get it towed out of there because it's blocking traffic.
That's correct, because the position of us is, the position of the police department is, the sooner we can get the accident cleared from the roadway, the less chance there is of another accident occurring in the backlog of traffic or in the process of us directing traffic. So that's a consideration for what we do. But no, you're not required, if your car's off the roadway and it's passable, we don't require people to use Colgan to tow their vehicle.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure if we do enter into an agreement that option would not be lost or sacrificed as a part of the contract.
No. What brought this to the police committee's attention was there was an elderly gentleman last winter at 2 or 3 in the morning who was limping his car home with a flat tire. And he was pulled over by an officer because he's driving on a rim and it just wasn't a safe condition, and he was actually a hazard because he was going so slow. In any event, remember that Swissville's only a 1 square mile borough. This gentleman was towed a few tenths of a mile, and it cost him over $300 to get his car out the next day. And so then we on the police committee started talking about, well, what are fair and reasonable charges, and what can we do on council to try to make this as painless as possible for citizens. But that's what brought this to a head.
And I think to this point, having an agreement would be good, because I agree that they're exorbitant, but as we saw in the research, it's pretty much across the board what the market rate is for these things, unfortunately. So if we can enter into a contract to potentially lower that price, that's check one is a plus. I think the next plus is if we can publicize it, like Ms. Alfonso Wells said on the website, it is clear that it's not, a resident doesn't have to fear that I'm just being arbitrarily charged something, especially when it feels exorbitant. Like, are they kind of, taking advantage of me right now? The fact that is publicized, I think, aids in that. Thirdly, one of the things, and I shared this with Ms. Scales, that as we negotiate, I would really like to have a part of that negotiation is the opportunity to take electronic payments, credit card payments, because in that particular instance that Mr. Price is talking about, the individual, they don't take credit cards, as far as I'm aware. They only take cash. And who is really carrying around $225 of cash in your car? Probably none of us are. And so I think that's an element that should really be part of that opportunity that, for me, would give favor that someone would be able to charge it to get there, right? Because if he had paid $225 cash, he would have been able to have it towed right to his home. But because he didn't have the cash, it had to be towed to the impound lot. And the next day, getting it out, adding the storage fees in it, is what passed over $300. So I think that even if he was able to pay with a credit card, he would have been able to save $50 or so on that transaction. So those are some things that I think are pretty important in this process. Chief Watson.
Mr. President, may I make a suggestion that if you're looking to take bids, that an RFP be put together for a list of services that we need to be provided by the tow company to make sure we're getting proper services?
My only concern with that, because I've been doing a lot of digging with this whole bidding process because of what I mentioned to you guys, I think the last council meeting, in regards to minority certified businesses, that even if they get certified, then it's the lack of capacity to properly submit a bid. And so then if we do put it up as an RFP, my understanding is we are then going to cut out some potential tow companies that can provide this service for us at a reasonable rate that may not just have the capacity to put together a proper bid. So that is my concern if we take that route. And Abigail has something to say a while ago. I'd like to hear what she wanted to say.
Oh, I'm that's okay. You touched on what I was going to say already, but I was going to add, when you were talking about the capacity to respond to an RFP, I seem to remember that Greg said that there is an exception to the RFP process for certain smaller contract things, because I think we might have done it for plumbing. Because I remember speaking up and saying, as a small business owner, I think most small business owners don't understand how to do, like, you wouldn't even know where to start for something like that. So you're ruling out small businesses.
The plumbing RFP that you're talking about, that was for the McClure Avenue, for those backflow preventers that we put in there. But that was because we were under a certain threshold money wise, because you can bid, you only have to get 3 written quotes for up to $21,900 under the borough code. So we were able to do that. We got written quotes off of a number of plumbers to do that. But what Chief Watson's alluding to is an RFP. Under an RFP, though, you would not have to, they would not have to secure a bid bond or anything like that. And I understand, Ms. Scales, that's what your concern is. They may not have the capacity to actually bid on this. because they may not be able to get a bid bond or something along those lines, or it'll be too costly for them. But under an RFP, basically, we would just put together a scope of services and they would fill in the amounts and then send it back to us. So it's not a sealed bid. It's basically a written quote of here's our price schedule. You know, if we said here are the services we need, just fill in blanks, and there would be no type of bonding or anything required with that. It would, we just look at it. The police committee could look at them and say, this is who we want to go with.
Are we obligated with an RFP like a bid to take the lowest bidder in that, or is there flexibility to choose?
You can take I'm sorry, Bob, could you please respond?
Well, one of the things that makes this different is in general, it's not being paid for by the borough. It's really getting a list of prices that the tow company is going to guarantee to the borough. But in most cases, the actual fees are paid by the members of the general public. So I think that gives you some flexibility in deciding on a number of factors. Who can keep the vehicle safe, how far the citizens are going to have to go to get the vehicles, how much insurance you're going to require. So I think it gives you flexibility in terms of the lowest responsible bid, because you're not actually paying these fees in very few cases, right, Greg? I mean, just probably in cases of victims of a crime or something like that, the borough doesn't pay the fee, do they? Just
Correct.
We do not.
Yeah, the owner of the vehicle always pays the fees. So they wouldn't be contracting, the fees would not be coming directly from the borough.
Question I have with that RFP process, can we still say, if, I reach out to a random tow company to find out, what their fees are, and if there's any willingness to have a discussion, could I then encourage that person to submit an RFP?
There's nothing wrong, inappropriate about that. I mean, you can encourage various providers who maybe haven't been involved before to proposal. There's nothing inappropriate about that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McTernan. And Mr. McTernan, I want to apologize to you for being misinformed and misdirected as well. So going forward,
Jumped the gun on that agreement. I misunderstood, and I'll be more careful in the future.
Mr. McTernan, somebody had to say something about an agreement to you. So I wanted to apologize for you being misinformed and misdirected. And going forward, Mr. McTernan and Greg, when you sit down and talk to Mr. McTernan about police committee matters, can I please be added to the conversation?
Absolutely.
Ms. Stribling.
Yes. How did we come up with this list? Deanne, was it something you researched or you went through it through police committee?
So Chief did the research for us. They looked into neighboring tow companies and looked into what their fees were, and then put it out on a layout for us, just so we can have a bigger picture understanding. And this is something that he did to help us with our decision for the disabled parking violation signs. So we're not just, thinking, oh, this is too high, this is outside of what the market it goes for. And that research is actually helpful, because we see like, okay, it is high, but it's not significantly outside of what the market rate is for a tow company in general. So that's where we got these numbers from.
So, Ms. Scales, would it be helpful at this point in time? I think what you wanted to do was to begin a conversation to see if this is the direction of council. And I think that in general, it seems like people are on board with considering this. Can we, unless there's if there's any outliers or you don't agree with that statement, please feel free to chime in if you're not interested in us pursuing this. But if understanding or assuming that we are, can we bump this back to police committee to begin those conversations, putting together the RFP or however process you want to go? We trust you guys to do that, and then would bring it back to council when you have, a vendor per se that you would want to go with. Would that be acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank you guys. I know this has been for months. I mean, Mr. Price, you talked about how kind of one of the things that keyed into this was a tow in the winter. So, we're talking 7 months, and I know you guys have been working on this. Ms. Scales, I know you've done, and Chief Watson have done a lot of research in this. So I want to thank you guys for the work that you have put into this, and look forward to continuing this conversation. All right, not hearing anything else, let's move to item D, which is the discussion regarding the creation of a Borough Building Advisory Committee. Who wants to jump on this? I don't know if Mr. Price, you want to, as the chair of the building committee, or Ms. Scales.
Well, we were talking generally about, there are some areas that we on council don't have background in. I mean, we're not engineers, we're not architects. And I know we're very passionate about making sure that the building is going to be energy efficient. And one of the things we're considering are solar panels. So there may be people, residents in the community that have specialized skills that might be interested in tagging along with us and attending some of our committee meetings with us and helping us on to make decisions on some of these issues.
Yes, and then also to incorporate our stakeholders in the whole process of the building. We wanted to also include residents that have that skill set because they are stakeholders in this process. And so what we have come up with, what may be a better solution instead of creating a committee, because we want to continue on with the process with the development of the building, because we are moving along. Rather than the formation of an actual committee, maybe we have something similar to what we have on the police committee. We have Nathan Shawless, who serves as a liaison. So he is a resident, but he's a liaison to the police committee as well. So he's able to provide feedback, input, insight. He attends all of the meetings. He's invited to attend all the meetings, so he's not kept out any sort of meetings. The minutes associated with the meetings, those are also shared with him. And so rather than creating a separate committee, maybe we do something very much similar. We open up the floor for at least 2 residents to serve as liaisons on the building committee with us that has that engineering architecture background, but are also somewhat involved in the community as well, because then they can also provide feedback and to serve on the building committee with us in a very similar capacity as Mr. Nathan.
Personally, I love this idea. I think this kind of goes back to Mrs. Bull's comment in utilizing those in the community who have expertise in different areas to solicit feedback on different things, and I would be, fully support moving forward with this for the borough building and even look at it for other committees that we currently have having, some form of resident input. So I support it.
And we did something similar on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, where we reached out when we were trying to help Swissville have its first Pride event. And we reached out to the LGBTQ community for help. We've been doing this on a number of committees. Swissville is going to have its 125th anniversary next year. And we have some local historian type people that are going to be assisting council with trying to figure out some appropriate celebration for that.
Yeah, I'm excited about trying to get the residents, particularly like an engineer and architect, onto onto some of our meetings. I think it'd be important, and we need to put out a call so that we can do this as soon as possible, and not sooner rather than later, because time's are ticking, and we have already paid for some of the services that we're trying to get. So we have to make sure that we are not paying more for people's time, for them to sit and wait for us. That is extremely important. And I think that factor comes into it. So we need to get this out soon.
Now, we just did within the last week get sketches, preliminary sketches, and I'm not sure what kind of time frame, how quickly we can get that past committee and out to the public so that the public can see what they've initially come up with. Greg, do we have any kind of time frame on when we can release that?
Well, I think we need to release it to the full council first, and then after everybody's on board with that, then we can release the preliminary sketches. We can have a public meeting at some point if that's council's desire to go over what the site may look like. We're still in the preliminary stages of what this is what the building may look like. And then, we can get to the public. One of the things in the last week, they've been communicating with CORE. They want to try to get a meeting together in August at some point. And I know Ms. Scales is going to be on vacation for a few days. I will be out of the office for a few days. So it looks like it'll be like mid-August. They want to start discussing the finishes, the type of exterior of the building, the building committee has in mind, before they make a formal exterior plan, and then like a 3D model that they would give to us. And then the public could be more aware of that. But I think once the building committee gives their approval to the very preliminary plans, we'll share it with all of council. And then once all of council sees it, then we can get it up on the website, share it with the public, and once we start talking about finishes, then maybe have a meeting shortly after that, maybe in September sometime, public meeting, to answer any questions the public may have, if that's your desire.
Yeah, what's scary is that but today the Federal Reserve raised interest rates another 0.75%, and that it's sort of like we're chasing the tail of something running down the road. The price is increasing by the moment as inflation is taking off. Our loan costs are going to be going higher and higher. So that's why we want to keep the momentum up.
I had one of my notes to talk about in my borough manager report was to talk about the building, but I guess it's a good time to mention what I was going to say is there's been some emails going back and forth between the committee members and myself and the engineers in the last 2 weeks about some things that were omitted, not included in the plans and stuff. I'm going to take some time before the end of this week and synthesize that all into one document, get it out to all the building committee and back to CORE and LSSE to make sure everybody's on the same page, of what we want to see, the things that we brought forth that were not addressed in there. I think it's this council sitting in the building committee meeting, talking to other members of council. I think it's this council's will to see some sort of green infrastructure on the site, whether it be solar panels, geothermal, rain gardens, or combination of all three. So what I'm going to instruct them in this memo to everybody this week is, to design the building so that it can support solar panels, so that the vents for the bathrooms, the toilet rooms are not in the way of the solar panels, so that they're out of the way, so the panels can be easily put in, so that the electrical room is properly sized for future solar, so that there's a conduit going up to the roof to carry all the wiring down from the solar panels, et cetera, et cetera. So all those things should be addressed now. Maybe we don't put solar panels on now, but we can do it at any time if so that if the building is designed properly. So that's those are the things we want to focus on with them and with the building committee this week.
Yeah, one of the problems that Forest Hills ran into that they learned about later is they have a beautiful building with beautiful solar panels, but no sound barrier to protect them when you have rain pounding on all those panels. I understand it's very deafening during storms. So, just planning things like soundproofing and insulation.
Well, and And one thing that Chris and I have been talking about a lot is improving transparency. And transparency can be affected by horrible communication or communication that's not so clear. And so what I would prefer to do is to allow all of council to see this preliminary draft, get their feedback, and then put this draft out to the public to see. Because although this is preliminary, there's nothing definite. We need to be transparent in the step-by-step process that is taking place. And it seems like August is a good month for this to be out on the website, shared on the social media pages, because with everybody being out, there's no meetings that are going to take place in the month of August. What's next important to do is, if all of council are in support of this liaison position, that we add it onto next week's agenda to vote and approve these liaison positions so that it can be advertised on our social media pages, our website pages, and we can get applications in, similar to the process for our commissions, where we ask for resumes and applications to be considered for the position. And then hopefully what we can do is at the end of August or the beginning of September, have interviews of the potential candidates and then vote to approve those candidates to serve as the liaison, so we can continue this process, but also be transparent in the process.
Are we talking one person or multiple?
Maybe a couple. It depends on what skill sets are offered.
Two to three are very sufficient. I know that with the police committee, the reason why we have one is because we only had one person that basically had that particular interest to serve in that capacity. So that's why we have one. But 2 to 3 should be sufficient to serve as liaisons on the building committee. And this would be a temporary position, because once the building is put up, built, then we're no longer talking about the formation and the development of the committee. So it would be a temporary position.
Ms. Salisbury, did you have something you wanted to add? I know you were unmuted a few moments ago.
I did, and then somebody else brought it up, so it's okay.
Okay, great, good.
Did I see Miss Stribling have her hand up earlier for this?
I think that was for the previous.
No, I had it for the last comment, but I am also in support of this. I think it's a great idea to be able to have the residents come together and be a part of the process, so they can feel like they're actually in tune with what's going on with the building of the building, as well as they can communicate this to the other parts of the residents in the community. So I would definitely be in support of it. And like Ms. Bowles said, it has to have that, sense of transparency and community. The only way we can do community if we work together.
Mr. Batchy, I know that the last round that came had some changes with, on the actual site plan, like the parking lot areas and some of the facilities inside. What do you think the turnaround time would be for CORE to get back with some of those changes?
It'll probably be a few weeks, because like the stuff you and I were talking about with the restrooms and the other things I was going to put together here in the next couple of days. I mean, it'll be a week or two for that. But I think the overall plan that's there. I mean, I'll send the plan out to all the council tomorrow, and then with a notation that these things may change, but it's not.
Yeah. List. And maybe that's the way to do it, because my fear of putting it out in kind of soliciting on this feedback is already it's dated, because there's already things that we have said, no, we don't like that. We want to move, we want to change this, we want to change that. And I want to make sure that we're giving, the best option. But I mean, if it's going to take a few weeks, maybe the best option would be to put out what we have right now and note the things that we've already said, that we've kind of sent back and said, redo this part. So that's at least aware.
Yeah, because I don't think the footprint of the building is going to change. If it does, it will be very little. And to get a general idea of what the building looks like. And, this might move to here inside the building, but the council chambers, community room, that area, that's, the whole thing's not going to move. It's,
So here's my suggestion is to have that sent to council, as Ms. Scales had said. And I think it would be helpful not only to annotate what some of the changes are that we want to see made, but maybe even having a couple of just explanatory paragraphs of what the rationale, like we talked about the community room and the fact that that there's like a kitchen that has a door to the exterior so that catering can come in directly to that door. Like just a little bit to give some narrative so that both council who have not been part of this process on the building committee to this point, as well as when that is released to the public, that they're not just staring at a bunch of squares and thinking, what does this even mean? That there's a little bit of explanation as to kind of what the flow and what the purpose of some of those spaces are. I think that would be really helpful to all who participate or look at those sketches.
Yeah, one of the things that we adopted from Forest Hills is that they have a large room that serves sometimes as a community room, sometimes as council chambers. And with the design that Core's come up with, this is a room that would probably be available for bridal showers and weddings and baby showers, high school graduations where, perhaps families could rent the space and have a kitchenette area and all that. So I'm feel very positive about it.
Great. Any additional comments on that? All right, well, let's keep moving through. Next, we have item E, discuss a resolution to support House Bill 912, which I just want to highlight is actually Senate Bill 912. I was trying to kind of figuring out what I was doing wrong when I was looking up HB 912, and it was giving me something about like healthcare, and I was like, this isn't right, changing years and whatnot. So it's Senate Bill, which in the annotated agenda you sent us, Mr. Batchy did list it as Senate Bill, but I just want to make sure for the motion next week that it says such. So Senate Bill 912, this was tabled 2 months ago. Ms. Scales, do you as chair of the DEI committee want to make any comments about this to kick off our discussion?
Yes, so I'm glad we're bringing it back to the forefront, and essentially what the call to ask was from sisters is that we support their request for basically better housing discrimination laws that could improve basically housing for the LGBTQ plus communities, and specifically the Black and Brown trans community, because homelessness is an issue for them. And homelessness is an issue for them because landlords are often abusive or retaliatory against them and will use their criminal backgrounds as a means to evict them or as a means to deny housing. And so the way that the Fair Housing Discrimination Act on a federal level is worded, it does not prevent discrimination of housing on the grounds of basically a criminal background. And so the call to ask is that we as members of council would join in on a letter of support, that we would write a letter coming from us supporting changes in legislation that would not allow landlords to be abusive or retaliatory or deny housing on the grounds of your criminal history or your criminal background, to improve housing for the LGBTQ plus community. That is what the call to ask. And so the way that this motion is formed, it does state that we're moving to support, Senate Bill 912. And it does state similar legislation that will protect individuals from abusive landlords, but it doesn't really speak to the criminal history, and because that's the issue. The issue is that LGBTQ, specifically also the Black and Brown trans community, they have a criminal history. and landlords can then abuse their privileges in housing by saying, oh, I'm going to evict you because I don't like your criminal history. And they might have known about that criminal history when they allowed them to lease the space, but then will turn around and use that as a means to evict them, basically. So I don't see any wording about that.
Well,
And I talked to Bill about
I just want to be clear as we're saying this, that some of them may have a criminal history because due to circumstances of, being kicked out of the household or different types of things that may have been circumstances a little bit out of their control somewhat, but not all. Just some people may face this. I don't want anyone to think we're saying that the trans community is a criminal community. That's all.
That's why I worded it the way I did. If you read the last sentence, it says it would keep building managers, housing authorities, etc., from bar them from discrimination in the provision of safe and affordable housing based upon the past history of the individual seeking housing. So I wrote that like that. So basically it didn't point out like criminality or like point to LGBT community members as like they are criminals or any other issues. So it just said they can't discriminate on their past history, which could be anything, whether it's criminal or whatever that somebody would come up with to try to deny them housing. I mean, I'm open to any suggestions to change it. But I just thought that was a way not to make it look like anybody is a bad person, or to try to get the trans community is are bad people. I just tried to soften it so that it looked like we're protecting everyone, but not pointing out individual issues.
Well, I think the fact that it's joined with the context of Senate Bill 912, if anyone looks up what Senate Bill 912 is, they'll see what the context of that is. So I personally am comfortable with that. I don't love the Senate bill the way it's written. I think there are some provisions that they could have made, or just some language they could have used a little bit different to that I would have been a little bit more comfortable with. But I do want to note that Jay Costa is one of the co-sponsors of this bill. And I know that he's someone who we all have a lot of respect for here in the community for this. So.
Well, we all know I'm in support of it. So it's more so, are you guys in support of it? So it can be placed on the agenda for a vote next week, voted on and approved, so that Greg and Sarah can start writing the letter.
I'm in support of it.
I'm in support as well.
Ditto, support.
Thanks.
Support of writing a letter.
Thanks. Pretty sure sisters will be very appreciative, in addition to the LGBTQ plus community. So thank you guys.
Are we comfortable with the language there? I did reach out to Ciora, I emailed her and tried to call her, but I've not heard back from her. So, we still have a week, if she has any changes she'd like to see, I can send it out to all the council. But are we currently just with the language there? Is that okay?
I like the language. I'll reach out to her assistant. I know that she was away out of the country and she just returned back. And so their demand right now overshadows how much actual in-house support they have to meet everything. So I'll reach out to her assistant to see if there's any changes that need to take place with the language.
All right, great.
All right, so let's have that on the agenda for next week's meeting. Any other comments about that before we move on? Let's look at item F, discuss proposed bamboo ordinance. You should have all received that from Mr. McTiernan, both from Mr. McTiernan and Mr. Bakshi this week regarding it. This is something that I brought up last month for us to have some conversation around. And so thank you, Mr. McTiernan, for putting that language together. Basically providing, acknowledging bamboo and specifically running bamboo, not clumping, which, when it first says bamboo, I wrote a note to myself. It's like, well, we wanted to specify which kind, and it does later under the definition section. that it's not allowed in the borough. It is a nuisance unless there are certain preventative measures that are taken to verify that it doesn't creep on neighbors' properties or a containment unit for the root system, et cetera. Any comments or questions about this?
I'm in support of the bamboo ordinance because I have had residents come to me and say that it is overtaking their backyard. I did research on it online, and aside from nuking it from orbit, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of options for getting rid of it. Some of the suggestions I saw were pouring concrete over the entire root system, which we've already had Dr. Mercurio in to talk to us about our lack of water permeability in the borough. So I don't recommend treating bamboo by pouring concrete all over it. And then other options are things like Roundup, which we all know that that's, very toxic and has a lot of negative consequences in the environment. So part of the problem is it doesn't just spread from atop of the ground like a normal plant that we are often used to seeing. Like I have tomatoes that have gotten out of control. It has rhizomes underneath the earth that spread underneath. And so you might have a whole root system in your backyard because of your neighbor's bamboo, and you have no idea until it all of a sudden pops up. So then you might be out there with hatchets and axes and Roundup and thermonuclear warheads and other things to try to get it out of your backyard. So I think it's best to nip it in the bud, too horrendous of a pun, I don't know. But I think it's best to do something about it. I do think that we should take a look at areas where there are bamboo, I don't know if populations, plantings, whatever you want to call it, that are already problematic too, because this is sort of intended at heading off future efforts of planting it without a containment system, because we do have people in the community who have neighbors who have already planted this and it's already growing through their property. So I just think that we should pass this, because when we're already talking about doing things with native species, and this is not only not a native species, I mean, apples are not native, for instance, but I don't care if you stick an apple tree in your yard. This is a non-native species that is incredibly fast growing, incredibly hard to control, and can take over your whole backyard in, it sounds like, a season.
Well, I was going to ask you too, Ms. Salisbury, what were your thoughts on the proposed ordinance because of the research that you've done? And I know you've had the opportunity to speak directly with the residents that are impacted by this. So I did wanted to know, what were your thoughts on the proposed ordinance? If you're cool with it, I'm cool with it. I just want to make sure that code has whatever they need so that when this ordinance is voted on, approved, and it's in play, they can enforce it.
Maybe this is a good time to have Mr. Wilhelm speak to that, since we have him in the meeting, if he feels confident that he would be able to enforce the ordinance as written.
It's going to be difficult. I think that some of the bamboo species that are mentioned here will be easy to look at, but the one that concerns me the most is the Fallopia, because it is on thousands of parcels of property in our borough. While it is associated with the bamboo genera, if you will, it's been a wild invasive species throughout Pennsylvania for decades and decades. And I mean, I can drive through some alleys where every house is affected in the alley. And the first one that comes to my mind is the alley between Manor and Hawthorne, as an example. And there are huge portions of that on borough-owned property throughout the borough. And that is going to be an extraordinarily difficult one. I don't have an answer I could say that we will do the best that we can with what we have available to us. But that one particular plant species, as you could tell, I looked at it a little bit, try to educate myself a little bit about them. That one is just like, wow, it's everywhere. And I don't know how, and nobody's planting it. It's just a wild weed that has overtaken so many areas within the borough. And then what do we do at that point? I mean, we send them a letter, tell them to get rid of it, and then start citing them. And a lot of this stuff, it's like beyond their control. So I don't know how we.
Some of what makes, like, it's interesting. Bamboo is a plant where if you do have it planted in a sustainable way and you have it under control and it's in a commercial environment, it's a really cool plant because it's super sustainable because it's actually a grass, but you can make your floor out of it. You can make fibers out of it. You know, there's lots and lots that you can do with it because it grows so quickly, but then it's also invasive and horrible for the exact same reasons. So, and I know I used to go to events and people would give it out. Have you ever seen like the little plants where they have like the lucky bamboo thing out? And I don't know if people knew if there was anything wrong with planting it, but I think we almost have two separate issues. Issue one is people intentionally planting new you know, plantings or crops or whatever of this. And then the other is that we have existing populations of it. So, I mean, to me, if it is that invasive to where it's already spreading through the whole borough, that almost just makes the point, right? That it's a problem that we have to deal with. And the fact that it's everywhere, I mean, I don't want to go out and have to hack anything down. I mean, for all I know, I have some of it on my property. I don't know, but I don't think I do, but who knows? Sometimes things pop up. But, you know, I think that we have to handle it now before it gets worse, because since we have empty lots, it'll spread and be completely uncontained. And then people might just go and plant it because they think it looks pretty.
Well, I would encourage everybody to look up the Philopia and look around the borough, because it is, like I said, everywhere. And I don't know how, I don't know how we have the resources to address all that. And I'm just, again, the other stuff, I understand the bamboo and the other things in the ordinance, but that one particular issue, that one particular species, if you will, is very troublesome. I don't know how we could overcome that from a code enforcement perspective.
I do believe that if we at least start with paying attention to the residents that may be having a problem because they've called and said, hey, I noticed that, you know, maybe they cannot communicate effectively with their neighbor. You know, neighbors are a very tenuous type of relationship. So maybe they cannot effectively talk with them for whatever reason. And this actually gives them and us a way of speaking with the neighbor so that they can try to mitigate the effects. So I'm not I mean, yes, it is a concern for some of the wild spaces that we have, relatively speaking, but more concerned about the property damage for certain, you know, people that are just like, hey, I've talked to you and you're not doing anything about it. To make people understand that this is serious, you need to try to contain your bamboo. And actually think about what you are putting into the ground. I mean, you can't just plant anything. I've been very cautious with making sure any bamboo that I get for decorative purposes is dried out. Otherwise, it can start shooting into the ground. And next thing you know, your neighbors are like, hey, why do I have bamboo over here? So hopefully people will start being more conscious about it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with all those things. I mean, I know that there is this existing bamboo, you know, the provision in the ordinances, you can keep it, but you have to maintain, you know, I think it's 10 feet from property lines. So there is space that they need to be responsible as owners of the property to make sure that it is contained and not going out of control. I mean, I think next steps for this, it seems like most are on board with it, is we would need to advertise it. And I think the earliest that we could vote on it would be the September meeting, because it needs to be advertised in the Valley Mirror. And, you know, per Ms. Scales referred to this earlier, that she and I have been talking about ways to increase communication from the borough. I think that something like this, when we have ordinances like this, we should be putting them on social media as well, website, things like that. So anyone who has feedback, whether positive or negative for this, has the opportunity to weigh in, and then we can go from there and make an educated decision. All right, not hearing anything else. So let's move to item G, the last in our agenda, which is discuss collaboration with Humane Action Pittsburgh to install native species pollinator garden. I know we talked about this last month. I know there have been a lot of there's been a lot of public comments about it. I know it's something that the community is really excited about. I talked to a council member earlier this week, and they had, I think, a really good idea for next week when we do bring this to the table, is to actually break it down into 2 separate motions. The first motion is to take steps in confirming our relationship with Humane Action Pittsburgh, basically. And Mr. Bush even kind of alluded to this in his public comment, is first and foremost saying, we support this project, we support this organization, we want to move forward with it, we are committed to moving forward with it, is the first motion. And then the second motion would be regarding the location, because I think that is, I've not heard any complaints or dissenting voices about the project itself from council. What I think there's been some discussion around is the location. And I know many residents spoke tonight in favor of the property along Edgewood Avenue. But I do think that is where some of the conversations or the disagreement has happened to this point. So that is what my suggestion would be for next week, so that we can ensure that we're not missing out on something just because, like, that we're able to try to figure out where the difficulties or the kind of the straining points would be in that process. So I would welcome what others think.
Go ahead, Josh.
So I just wanted to speak to this because I really haven't much, because last month I had COVID when this discussion was going on, and I was not feeling well at all. But I spoke to Bill about this. I'm in full support of this. I'm honestly a little baffled that it's become such a huge issue, but I can't speak to that. I think the lot on Edgewood is an excellent candidate for it. It is a awesome opportunity for a welcoming green space. It's my understanding that lot on Edgewood Avenue has been vacant and for 20 years, I think I heard in the discussions, and we have an option to do something with it. And it's not a permanent option. It's something that can be changed down the road. To echo one of the public commenters, for me at least, as an individual in council, I think it's a no-brainer. Obviously open for more discussion, but I just wanted to voice my support for it.
I just wanted to say I want to thank Humane Action Pittsburgh for wanting to bring the Hive program to Swissvale. So thank you, Abigail, for connecting those dots in that relationship. I also want to thank them for providing a copy of their DEI policy. And I want to also thank them for providing us something in writing in terms of this proposed program and addressing the questions that was asked at the meeting when the program was presented. That's just, for me, gives me a sense of peace in terms of due diligence. We received something in writing from Miranda Crosley with the program that she has, and then we even received a written PowerPoint presentation from Sisters with their call to ask. So seeking something in writing from Humane Action Pittsburgh is just being fair and making sure there's transparency and something in writing of what this program is about and what the intentions are as it relates to them. So I want to thank them for providing those. And I'm once again going to reiterate, I like the program. Let me be clearer than before, is that I want the program here. So instead of just saying I like this idea, I like this program, I do want this program to be here in Swissvale. I took the additional measures prior to the meeting to speak with residents, such as Seth Bush is who I spoke with, Miranda Crosley is who I spoke with, so that I can be informed in what is a native species park garden. Because although my husband is a gardener, I know absolutely nothing about gardening. And I don't want to always go to my husband about what's going in my community or advice about it. I want to go to my fellow constituents, such as folks like Seth Bush and Miranda Crosley. And that's how I found out about what this even is and what is the benefit to Swissvale to having it here.
And if anybody who's listening wants to look at those responses, I know not everybody has Facebook, but I posted them on Facebook, the answers to council's questions, just so that if people from the public would like to read that, we can also put that on the website. I'm sorry, I had to switch to a different device because my other device froze because I'm on really sketchy hotel internet.
Great, thanks, Ms. Salisbury. Mr. Price, go ahead.
I agree with Chris that I think that although we haven't voted, council's unanimous in supporting a native plant pollinator garden. The disagreement has been where to situate it, because I understand that Humane Action is willing to do this either on the Edgewood lot or on the Monongahela Avenue lot, and we're talking about that. There seems to be some drift, though, in the meeting. When my understanding is that they presented this as a native plant pollinator garden, people are using the expression parklet tonight. And Josh himself said that it's his understanding that this would be a project that would not necessarily be permanent, that if we did put it on the commercial land, that it would be there so long as it's at the will of council. And it may be a few years from now, if there's an opportunity for something in Swissvale, that maybe that land could be utilized for something else. But I want to clarify exactly what we would be voting on. You know, are we voting on, for example, the Flax project? I think it was Flax, right, Miranda? We don't call it the Flax Parklet. You know, it's an experimental project on scrap land in Swissvale to see whether or not it removes heavy metals from the soil. And, you know, I see the same thing with the native plant pollinator garden. Long term, I think we need a comprehensive plan on developing Swissvale and bringing it back. You know, what are we going to do with our commercial land? What are we going to do with our residential land? You know, how are we going to accommodate all the various needs that any community has? And I just want to make sure I understand what we're voting on next week. Are we voting on a park, a parklet, a pollinator garden, a project, something that's year by year, something that's permanent, you know?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Price, for those questions. Ms. Salisbury, you have your hand up.
So the more opportunities I've seen to use alliteration with the letter P, I've gotten increasingly enchanted with. So now we're up to a proposed pawpaw pollinator parklet project. And I keep adding more P words to it. But realistically, I mean, no, it's not a park in the way that like Lescotts Park is a park, for instance. You know, we can do something else with it down the road, because while I understand, I spoke to one of our crossing guards and she told me my daughter's 32. And when we moved here, when she was a little girl, that place was empty, you know, so it's been empty for many years, but that doesn't mean that one day we might not decide to do something else with it. So I think that, you know, we're not putting anything in there we're not building structures. We're not putting anything that's like a permanent fixture on that land that we couldn't relocate something, you know, even like a pawpaw tree can be dug up and relocated somewhere if you wanted to. So I've been just calling it a parklet because it's not big enough to be a park, but I thought parklet was cute and went with the alliterative rhyme scheme. So if you want to call it a garden or something, I'm totally fine with that. But I do understand the reluctance of, you know, wanting to make it like a dedicated space that can't ever be anything else. From what I understand, it used to be a hamburger restaurant years ago. This is well before my time. So we could do something with it down the road, but, you know, we can call it a pollinator garden. I think that's what we first initially started calling it before I got excited about calling it everything that started with P.
That's what Humane Action calls it, native plant pollinator garden.
Yeah, I just liked using things with P because I got excited the more words I could find with P.
The name Price is a P.
Yeah. Yeah, I think let's try to bring some cohesion to that name. Maybe Ms. Salisbury, you and Mr. Batchy, and even if you want to include me in that, can work on framing what that motion would be for next week, so that there is some clarity in that. So point well taken, both Mr. Price and Ms. Salisbury. Ms. Alfonso Wells.
Yes, I like I do like the collaboration with Humane Action Pittsburgh. I think it's a wonderful idea to bring something here, and that we have a partner to work with. I think it's fantastic. Of course, one of the things I always like to do, and you know, I love my field trips because I took some of you out on a field trip to go look at the Borough building in Forest Hills, is I would like to do a walkabout with HAP. Just to walk about to some of the different sites and you know, for us to point out different things, for them to point out things to me in terms of what are possibilities. I just think I find that interaction is very worthy, because you can actually see it instead of trying to imagine, oh, what does that look like? And so I would love to do that if they have some time, when they have some time, and of course when I have some time. In addition, I also had some questions I just wanted to check out with my pawpaws. You know, I like my pawpaws. Just little questions, particularly after we had that microburst of whatever it was that happened this weekend. I lost a flag somewhere, don't know where it went. I just know that I looked back out and I was on an edible garden tour and my flag was gone. So it flew somewhere, didn't even see where it went. But, and the trees in front of my house and across the street from me on Hayes Street lost limbs. So I just want to understand, of course, if we plant our pawpaw trees, which, you know, I'm all in favor of, how do those roots go down deep enough so that a good strong wind doesn't blow them across the street or knock over onto somebody? And of course, that's primarily on my mind right now, because I just had a bunch of tree limbs fall down to the side of my house and in front of my house. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at good locations, that and of course I want to walk around with HAP and discuss pawpaws and pollination and milkweed and all that kind of stuff, because I'm interested in it. So hopefully he's hearing me now and we can get together, and hopefully more of council would like to go and do a walkabout. I think that's always fascinating and interesting to see the benefits of our neighborhood and how we can beautify it.
I forgot to mention one thing. I did contact our shade tree group, and I put them in touch with Shannon at HAP in the event that they want to communicate with her about anything. I forgot to mention that, sorry.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thanks, Ms. Alfonso Wells. Mr. Miser.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Ms. Alfonso Wells just said. You know, while I am in full support of the proposed location on Edgewood Avenue, and kind of also to Mr. Price's point, as far as what exactly this would look like, I would want to see kind of a rendering of what the final project would look like. And ideally, for me, I would like it to be a somewhat interactive space, not just a lot that people are driving past, and if people didn't know any better, they'd be like, oh, there's stuff growing there now. You know, I'd like there to be, you know, a bench or two. I've talked about, you know, signage. You know, I'd like it to be something that the, you know, community members could interact with as they're walking down Edgewood Avenue, as opposed to just a lot with things growing in it, especially in that very visible location. So, you know, I know that HAP, you know, is footing the bill for this project. And I don't know if we said, hey, we want some benches and signage, if they're going to say that's outside of the scope of what we would do. But I'd at least like that option to make it a more interactive area for the community.
They're totally down with benches, by the way. Sorry, I was trying to use my computer mouse to mouse on my phone. It doesn't work.
No problem. Ms. Scales.
Oh, there I go. I just wanted to mention, in terms of the discussions that we are having in terms of location, the programming of itself, if we could consider it as a discussion and not a disagreement, because I don't consider this as a disagreement. more so we're just having a discussion. Understanding the ins and out about the program, how it's going to come about, how does it benefit the community? How does this particular location or that location, serve as best? This is a discussion. So I think in terms of how we phrase things and how we word things, we should be just a little bit cognizant of, instead of, so that this can facilitate the process and the continuous discussions of other subject matters that we'll have, that all of us or some of us are passionate about. So I'd like to, if we could, be cognizant of how we phrase and we term how we are engaging in topics that affect Swissvale, that this is a discussion and not a disagreement.
Thanks, Ms. Scales. Ms. Stribling.
Thank you. I would definitely also be in support of the pollinator garden. I actually was up there recently and seen the lot, and it's very gray. Like she said, there's just a lot of stones and rubbles there. So I think beautifying that space would definitely be appropriate. My question is, though, if we decided in favor of this, when would the actual process of the project begin?
So I can answer that. That's in their proposal that they've sent to us. So they basically said that as long as they can get started by October, they have enough time. They would rather get started a little bit sooner rather than later, of course, because it gives the plants more time to, set in before it gets cold. But they said that as long as they can get started by October, they'll have plenty of time.
And so then when the winter months comes, what happens to the garden? So like anything, it'll just have to be then, come spring, we'll have to continue to, just beautify it again. Because in that thinking, because by October, and as Bill indicated, and Sean as well, looking at different alternatives as well, could be something that could definitely be beneficial to us making the decision on whether that can be a permanent location or there's other lots that are available, could be just as, sufficient for that lot. But initially going forward, when I saw it, I was like, well, there isn't really anything there. If there hasn't been anything there for the last few years, then, maybe start there. If you can dig it up, then maybe somewhere else we can put it, in the future. But as of right now, I thought it would be a good location.
And some people have asked me if we have to break up pavement over there. I had somebody message me today and they said, I don't understand why this makes any sense because it's all pavement and it's not going to drain anyway. And it's not actually pavement, it's gravel. So I just wanted to mention that because not everybody hits all the areas of town. So you might not have seen it, but I've had some people tell me that they thought that it was pavement, but it's not.
Ms. Scales, you want to say something else?
Yeah, I also wanted us to be realistic in terms of the goals and the intentions of the program. Just looking at the write-up of this program and just how overall beneficial it is, from green, the green initiative with it, but also the educational aspect of it for our youth and the community aspect of it. And then this is going to cost roughly $10,000. That realistically, I don't see once this gets implemented that this is going to be something temporary, because it's that beneficial to the community that if there is a need to take it down or remove it, we're probably going to have this much of interest to say, don't take it down, don't remove it. So when we are voting and when we are deciding on, location for the program, I just want us to be very realistic that I highly doubt this is something temporary, just because of the high level of interest, the high level of benefit, and the amount of money that it's going to take place to first get it started. I do understand once it's installed, the maintenance is little to none for it. So the maintenance, I understand, is not really going to be that costly, but we just need to be very much realistic that this is not going to be temporary.
Ms. Alfonso Wells.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I'll just say that one of the things we need to be cognizant of, and we keep talking about this, but we don't actually do anything about it, is we should probably have some type of planning vision for the borough. We don't have that. And so we argue over tidbits, but we should have a vision, and we don't have a vision. And that's what makes some of these things so difficult, because everybody has some different perspective in terms of what they see and what they see for the future. So we should probably try to get some type of, planning thing going on. I know specifically, I have, no feelings whatsoever about either one of the parks or pollinated areas, relatively speaking. But I know that that little area right there on Braddock and Church, there's so much that can be done with it, and we haven't done anything. There's no vision. There's no anything. We talk sometimes about maybe putting something in or doing something, and people could be lurking around and all kinds of things happen, but we don't do anything. So if we could just get a little planning commission together, or plan, or have a powwow, have a neighborhood powwow where people talk about the vision of what they want to see our neighborhood and then act on it, that would be great, but we don't do that. So it'd be nice if, as we go forward, we think about these things so that the next time any ideas come up, we can see how that fits within our vision, and not be like, oh, so I just say that so that hopefully at some point within the next couple of months and not couple of years, we can, determine what is a good vision for the borough.
So we're going to go to Ms. Salzberg, but I'm going to cue myself in line after her because I've been waiting for a break, but everybody keeps raising their hands. So I'm consider my hand raised after Ms. Salzberg's done. Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess I'll work backwards. So on the planning question, since that has been brought up a few times, I did some research, and on the DCED website, there's actually money available. There's a grant available for municipal planning. So I did some research into that. So that is something that we could apply for. I think Mr. Price pointed out the last time we had a community plan was like the 70s or something. So we could definitely apply for that and have some sort of a professional planner come in and do that type of work. And there is that type of grant funding available. If we didn't get that grant in particular, I'm sure that we could seek funding for other things. One other thing I want to recognize in terms of planning is that we do have community members who are actively engaging in grassroots planning efforts, where they are personally going around door to door and talking to people and doing their own informal extra council, outside of the borough governance structure efforts. So I've been fortunate enough to be asked to join their reading group. They have a Fearless Cities reading group, if anybody wants to read that book along with us about doing municipal planning outside of the governance structure, using grassroots networks and just sort of informal groups of citizens in the community. That's been really, really informative, and talking about doing that from different perspectives that incorporate people who might not otherwise have the opportunity to be involved in governance and government level planning. So from that, I know that there's a lot of that work being done over in the Woodstock area, where people are sort of knocking on doors, going around and asking people what they would like. They've started having cookouts and things and inviting people over to talk about what they would like to see in their community. So I think rather than reinventing the wheel, we definitely have an opportunity to tap into those resources. I also don't want to step on the toes of Rotary, because Rotary has worked really, really hard to fundraise for that. I guess it is actually called a parklet over on Braddock and Church. And I know that they fundraised quite a bit of money for those trees and some of the other work that was done over there. So I want to make sure that we don't take away from the work that they've already done. And I know that they did have some other plans that were had to be suspended due to COVID. So I want to make sure that we don't, inadvertently kind of forget about the work that has been done over there, because that was done outside of council, and they have really put a lot of work together as a community group on that. So that's all.
Rotary raised $5,000, and we brought the check over to council and presented it to council. And a lot of things were purchased with that 5,000, things like dog disposal bag dispensers, benches and things. But then I don't know what's happened since. it was last left in the borough's hands, and COVID hit, and the things that 5,000 was donated for haven't occurred.
One of the, Sean Alfonso Wells can maybe correct me here, but I remember we talked to DPW about the folks over there being excited to get back to work on that project. There was one gentleman who works at DPW who was excited in particular to get back to work on that park. And so maybe that's something that we can make a priority now that we have an additional staff member coming in a supervisory capacity. I just remembered I forgot to bring up one more thing, which is part of the native species project. Since I know that Ms. Scales brought up the DEI aspects of it, one thing that I was particularly impressed with in the HAP proposal is that they talked about Native American permaculture. And by that, I don't mean Native American like people Native American, but Native like to America permaculture of plants. And so a lot of people don't know that things like apples aren't American. You know, they grew up with Johnny Appleseed stories and they have no idea that that plant isn't from America, it's from Europe. So there's a lot of opportunity for educating adults and kids alike, I think, about the kind of plants that were here in sort of, 1491.
Great. I'm not going to add too much to this just because we've talked about it a lot. I'm not opposed to Edgewood. I do think it makes a lot of sense in there. I think my hesitancy was just that I'd hate for us to have this gift of $10,000 and then, bulldoze it in 2 years if something else comes up. But the truth is we're spending that amount of money just increasing what we pay for salt for a year. So maybe I need to be a little bit less tight-fisted on those types of things. So I still would like, unless there are any dissenting views on this, I'd like to break it into 2 motions just because at least, if nothing else, if we cannot agree on a location, at least we've agreed to move forward with the project. So I don't know if others are okay with that. If you'd be on board with that for breaking it into 2 motions.
I think that's a good idea.
Saw a couple of their nods.
I just wanted to make one last comment. We talked about comprehensive plans and visions, and there actually was a comprehensive plan, a joint comprehensive plan from 2009 for Edgewood, Swissvale, and Rankin. And in that document, I was just looking through it now, one of the target development areas is the lot, the Mattis lot, along with the GAR spot, but it was identified, so that's now 13 years ago, as a target site for development in our borough. So just more fuel for the fire.
We need to have a special title for Mr. Misers, like the data miner or something. He knows everything that is on
maps and everything. I'm always impressed by
goodness.
your map abilities.
So, and speaking of that, Ms. Salisbury, if you don't mind sending that information about the grants for that plan to Mr. Batchy and myself.
Will do.
I do know one of the things, this is not necessarily relevant to this particularly, it's somewhat tangential, but Mr. Batchy and I are sitting down together, I think next week, to discuss, now that we've kind of got the office structure in, so this would have been one of my president's remarks, but I'll just give it now because it's related. Now that we kind of have our dream team, if you will, in the office, I'd like us to return our attention to some of these things that have been put on the back burner. And so he and I are going to be kind of brainstorming with some of these long-term projects that we've talked about, things like the trash can initiative, things like take-home vehicles, things like our vehicle purchasing plan, vacant lots, all of those types of things, and then prioritizing what are the things that we need to do first so that we can actually get movement on these things as opposed to just being in maintenance mode like we've been for a while. So that is something that we will be kind of brainstorming and then inviting council to kind of weigh in on some of those things down the line. So keep an eye out for that. Ms. Scales.
I just want to say with the trash can recycle initiative, it was myself and Sean. And Sean, who else? Was anybody else on that committee besides you and me? That initiative?
I think it was the 2 of us, but Abigail was one of the first people to donate money.
Okay.
So, and I think a lot of people on council actually donated money to it. So,
Yeah. So just in terms of those ongoing discussions, Chris, if you could include us, because
Sure.
we were a part of the committee for that initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really just putting kind of brainstorming what are those things that have fallen by the wayside over the last year as we've tried to, you know, rebuild the office team. So absolutely. I mean, we're not looking to exclude anyone from those conversations. We just want to make sure that we restart them. All right, well, that finishes our agenda. Let's move to our departmental reports. Item 5. So we'll start with police. Chief Watson.
Good evening. The first item I have is that there's been a series of criminal mischiefs in the area around Dixon School. We're working very diligently to try to identify the individual or individuals who are committing those crimes. It's occurred basically over 3 weekends between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. So we put some information out on social media, and we've got responses from some of the neighbors, and we're working to follow some leads that we've received. Is there any questions about that?
And Chief Watson, I know the last time we spoke was last week. Were there additional instances this past weekend?
Yeah, there was one.
One. Okay.
Yeah, they actually hit the same house twice while the officers were in the area. So we are using a wide variety of investigative methods to try to locate them. And so
I just want to remind people it's okay to call 911. I've had this discussion with some people in my area because I live on Schroyer, and that's one of the areas that's been impacted by this. I'm sure, like many other people, I was brought up that you call 911 if something's like on fire or if someone's actively dying. And so a lot of people feel bad calling 911, and so they don't call. I spoke to some neighbors who said, oh yeah, that happened to us 2 weeks ago, but we just didn't want to bother anyone by reporting it. So it helps the police if you can report this, because it helps them to track patterns and figure out what's going on and check cameras and things. So please do not be afraid to call the police and report it if this happens.
thank you very much. That is exactly what I've been saying for years, and will aid us in our investigation. So I appreciate that very much.
And I just want to mention, if you hear something or you see something, it's okay to call the police. But folks are definitely not quick to call the police, not because they don't want to bother them, but just because they're afraid of what the potential outcome may be by calling the police. But in this instance, please do not be quick to go on social media and not call the police if you hear something or you see something. One thing we have been talking about in the police committee, that, you know, when these types of events take place, it would be very beneficial if we had working cameras in Swissvale, that our police are not asking community members to check their videotapes and check their doorbell cameras, because we don't have any to help them with trying to track down criminal acts that take place in Swissvale. So if we could continue to have conversations about how can we get some cameras in Swissvale that can help our police, that'd be very, very helpful and beneficial to the community.
If there's nothing else on that topic, the other thing I have is that on August 6th, it's been a while, advertised from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Needs Funeral Home has very graciously donated a pretty substantial sum of money to conduct a gun buyback program. And we're going to involve other police departments, specifically Edgewood and Braddock Hills. And I think that event will be a good thing to start working on. I think Mr. Need has stated that he wants that to be a reoccurring event every year.
Ms. Scales, do you have a question about the buyback?
No, but Chief, if we could
Yes.
just share light on some of the upcoming changes that are going to come about with our police reporting, just so we can inform the community on some of the changes that they can expect to see when it comes to our police report and reports of crimes and acts that take place in Swissvale.
Yes, ma'am. We're working, the police department's working on having a map that would show criminal activity that occurred in the past up to the current time, available online. And I'm working with the police committee on another method of pushing information out across several social media platforms and on our website, where we'd be able to put information out more quickly about things going on. So the police committee has expressed a lot of interest in moving this forward, and I'm working to get that done.
Thank you so much, Chief. And with the unveiling of the Uvalde report, there's some questions and things that we've received from the police committee in terms of command structure and things of that nature. Just so the community is aware, we do have command structure in place. That's not the case for us. We actually have an active shooter plan that our police actually are the teachers for the training for, and then we actually do have a command structure as well, correct?
Yes, ma'am. The Swissvale Police Department works with the Turtle Creek Valley COG. We have had an active shooter training program in place for about 4 years. We've trained, I believe, upwards of 200 officers in the eastern suburbs, and we are a big part of that program. And we also have done some additional training outside of that that involves active shooter type situations.
Thank you so much, Chief. And then if we could just touch a little bit on clarity of patrol. Sorry to put you on the spot, but these are just
That's okay.
things that I wanted to make sure we discuss, because we have been discussing them in the police committee, and we've been discussing them in the police committee because there have been concerns that have come to us from the community. So if we could share light in terms of how patrol is set up in Swissvale with our police to patrol the Swissvale area.
Well, every shift has a supervisor and either 1, 2, or 3 patrolmen, depending on our staffing availability. Those officers are given details of what they're specific things that they might have to deal with during the day. Like a parking complaint or something that's reoccurring, or like, with the criminal mischief, they are updated about what's going on about that and how they're going to deal with that for the shift. And then the officers leave the station and go out and patrol the streets during their shift. So they return to file a report or to take a break, like for lunch. So other than that, they're out patrolling. And the police committee has expressed that they want to make sure that we're covering as many streets as possible during the shift, which we are doing.
In terms of control during an active shooter situation, is it usually that our police station would be the one in control? So it wouldn't be, for example, if the unimaginable happened, it wouldn't be the school safety officer that would be in charge. It would be whoever the first, I don't know, patrol officers that got onto the scene, and their supervisors would be in control.
Yes, the officers would respond. I mean, when it comes to an active shooter situation, the first responsibility is to go to where the shots are being fired to end the incident as quickly as possible. But then officers following up, someone would take command of the overall scene and be in charge of the scene.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately, after seeing the Uvalde report, a lot of people are concerned that I don't think that would happen here. We hope to God nothing ever happens here, right? But it's nice to know that we do have a chain of command that is already embedded in our system, so that the lack of a commander on scene, or the lack of any type of, someone being in charge that has good training and uses their training would not be an issue.
No, we train extensively on what to do with this.
Chief, did you have more, or was that the end of your report?
No, I have nothing else to add.
Okay, wonderful. Let's move to Code and Fire. Chief Wilhelm.
I'm sorry, my light is out. I'm sitting on my porch. I don't have anything extraordinary or out of the ordinary to report. We've just been trying to keep everything together, keep doing what we need to do. It's been exceptionally busy. It's a busy time of year between street sweeping, code enforcement, and we've had an extraordinarily high call volume this year, the highest year ever, as I had said previously. One of the things you may have noted on social media is we tested all of our fire hose a few weeks ago, and that's something that we've really never talked about, but we used to pay a company about $6,000–7,000 a year to do that. And we brought it, I brought it back in-house to where we did it ourselves. We had an old pressure tester, had an associate member in a restaurant, excuse me, we had an associate member and a resident, John Orovic, who was a pump specialist, who happened to rebuild that pump and give us the ability to test our hose again. So we were able to save that on our annual budget over the last 3 years. And lastly, I just wanted to comment on the active shooter stuff. One of the things you may not be aware of is the Swissvale Fire Department had the opportunity to train with the city of Pittsburgh, because we work a lot with the city of Pittsburgh Bureau of Fire, and they allow us to use their training academy and open training up to us. And we also did rescue task force training, where we embedded all of our medical personnel, all of our firefighters that are cross-trained with the city SWAT team for extrication and triage of victims during active shooter situations. We have not been asked to participate with this local COG task force, but it is something that is a national best practice. And hopefully in the near future, we'd be able to do that. But all of our firefighters have been through that training. And, we are prepared to do that if needed, something we hope we never have to do, especially in a school setting. But nonetheless, that's something that should be aware of. A lot of people don't realize that firefighters and paramedics and EMTs have to go into that same situation as the police officers. And it's often overlooked, but we want to let you be rest assured that we've taken that training and we're prepared for that.
Thank you, Chief Wilhelm. Ms. Scales, do you have a comment or question?
I'm glad that Chief Wilhelm brought up the fact that the firefighters deal with active shooter training as well, because that was going to be a question of mine. That if you guys have gone through active shooter program, training to know how to respond and how to act, if you ever have to deal with that situation. Hopefully, like Sean said, that never happens, but is the fire department prepared?
Yes, we have taken that initiative, and we have trained for that over the last several years. We've also attended seminars by nationally renowned specialists in that. And what many of you may not know is I do have a particular knowledge of similar situations, and I understand a lot of the tactics because I was a police officer myself for 7 years in a past life. So I think that we're in good shape as best as we can be for our service agency type. And we hope that never happens, but I always make that a priority to make sure we're prepared.
Sorry, Bill. I have one more question. A question that I have is for street sweeping. Because I had a constituent reach out to me that she's had open heart surgery. And so there's been difficulty with making it outside in time to move her car from one street to the other. If someone has that type of issue or disability, do they need to just put up a disability hanger or tag in their vehicle to avoid being ticketed? Or will they still be ticketed?
The ordinance doesn't necessarily provide for that, but we do make accommodations for people. As an example, if you had your vehicle parked in front of your home and you went on vacation for a week or two, you phone that in and let us know, and we, kind of give that a pass. But to permanently allow somebody to not have to move their vehicle and not street sweep under their vehicle for the entire summer, that would be something that the manager and or the solicitor would have to come up with some resolution. We just enforce, what is there. We can't rewrite the ordinance and just give special exception blanket for the whole 6 months unless council directs us to do that, which I think would open up Pandora's box.
Okay, so even if they have a disabled placard in their car, that's not sufficient enough. They need to reach out to the borough manager, get that exception.
Council has to direct me how they want to deal with it, because we would be giving them a privilege that we don't afford to other people in the community. And if that's the prerogative of council, then we'll follow your directives. But just like if you have a handicap spot, they still move their vehicles for street sweeping. The street sweeping says you have to move your vehicle so that they can sweep. If there's extenuating circumstances or things like that, we always try to accommodate people, but I can't give you an answer to just give a blanket statement that we could not ticket her car for 6 months unless that's council's prerogative.
So then council, I think we need to figure that out definitely for our senior citizens. And then because this constituent is a senior citizen, in addition to the open heart surgery and everything else. For the most part, my senior citizens, they try to handle these issues on their own. But then sometimes they will bring it to my attention, and we all know I love my senior citizens. So maybe we should think of what can we do just to help them out in these circumstances.
Ms. Scales, sorry, just to interject, I was under the impression that if someone had a handicap placard in a designated handicap spot, that they would not be ticketed for street sweeping. Is that incorrect?
I will have to check on that. That was not my understanding, but if that is what's going on, do you know anything about that, Mr. Batchy?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we do not tag handicap.
Okay.
We do not tag people with a handicap placard in a handicap space. So if this individual has a handicap placard, she should contact the borough immediately to get a handicap space, and then she would not have to move her car.
Yeah, but then that kind of goes to what Abigail said about the folks who reach out to her about the police and not wanting to bother people. Certain folks who have handicap placards feel like they're taking up space from other people by getting a handicap space put there. And so they don't want to get a handicap space because then they feel like they're taking up space for somebody else that could park there when they're not parked there.
How do we know then?
That's why I'm asking if they have the handicap placard in their car. So the code enforcement individual who drives down the street and notices cars that have not been moved, does he look inside the vehicle to see that there's a handicap placard or not?
Only in the handicap parking spaces.
Okay.
Because then if there's not a placard, he will issue 2 tickets, one for street sweeping, and then also for using the handicap space without a placard.
But what if they're not? They're not even in the handicap space. They're just parked.
I think the solution is that the resident should call the borough and get a handicap designated space in front of their place of residence. I mean, that is the solution the borough provides for these types of situations.
So otherwise she's going to keep getting ticketed if she doesn't want to take up a space from other people. But she has a handicap placard.
She's really not taking up space though, because it would just designate a place where she could park, but she's parking her car on the street anyway. So it's a very noble thing that she's doing by not wanting to be a burden to the neighbors, but she's entitled to it. She has health issues, and I would encourage her to call us, and she would have to supply a copy of her placard and a copy of her driver's license as proof of residence. And we can have it installed in 3 days. After we make the one call, it would be up 3 days in 3 days when the one call is clear. I
might have to continue this discussion, because if she doesn't want to take up a space from other people, And the lady just had open heart surgery. And that is the reason why she can't move her car as quickly as can be. We should do something to accommodate that without forcing her to get a handicap space.
Is your proposal, though, anybody with a handicap placard hanging in their car should not have to move for street sweeping? Because to Chief Wilhelm's point, that seems to open up kind of a Pandora's box.
It does, but somebody that has a handicap placard and actually has an issue that's impeding their ability to actually move the vehicle in time, there should be something done to accommodate.
I think they can call. They can call. They should be able to call and at least explain their circumstances. I know I do not have that particular issue, but I have called on occasion to let someone know my car broke down. I can't get it out from in front of my house, and I know the street sweeping is getting ready to happen. And they've been very accommodating. So I think that if she calls and lets them know, you know, I've had open heart surgery. I can't move my car. This is my license plate number. I'm more than sure that I know, well, I don't know him very well, but I do know who's doing our code enforcement. And I have a strong belief that he would sit there and not ticket.
We've always tried to be very accommodating, as accommodating as we can be. But the reality is, I don't mean to like replay this old saying, but we don't know what we don't know. So if we don't know the circumstance because nobody reached out to us and explained anything, we don't know that particular car is there because open heart surgery and can't drive it for a few weeks or what have you. So it's a two-way street. We always try to be accommodating, but there has to be an effort also from the citizen to let us know the circumstance.
Mr. Price.
Yes, my comment was back on Uvalde. The day after the Uvalde happened, it had been reported that one of the reasons for the delay in response time was because the police on the scene did not have the equipment to batter down a door. So I reached out the next day to both Chief Watson and Chief Wilhelm and asked about that. And Chief Watson told me that every squad car in Swissville has door bashing equipment in the trunk of the car. And I also talked to Chief Wilhelm because the fire company by nature has to be able to break down doors to stop fires. And they have that equipment, and they also have equipment to protect them if they're at a fire and there'd be an active shooter. That I was very impressed with the equipment that Chief Wilhelm has assembled for the fire department.
And one of the things that we got that $37,000 EMS grant is to replace our ballistic vests because they expire over time. So that was one of the reasons that we applied for that funding, to use that to help update our equipment.
Yeah, because we could have an urban situation where they're trying to put out a fire and they're taking shots.
All right, are there any other comments or questions about this?
Hey, I would like to jump in just really quick, if you guys don't mind. Sarah Ansel, Executive Assistant to the Borough. I deal a lot with those parking tickets. So I think if I could just jump in here and give you guys a little bit of information and background, I will just let you know that code enforcement is extremely accommodating for residents who have physical limitations and who call ahead and let them know that this is something that's taken place. They are very, very willing to work with any resident. So if that's an issue, I would just encourage any resident to call the borough office, 412-271-7101. We will be more than happy to get in touch with code enforcement and get you in touch with code enforcement and work with you. So if you do have something that's happened like that, you've had a heart condition or something like that, any kind of surgery, code enforcement, as I said, I work with them all the time. We process all the parking tickets, and we can work that on an individual basis. So just don't be afraid to reach out to us. We can make things work. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sarah.
Ms. Scales?
Yes. One thing about code enforcement that I found out through social media that is a nice tool that's on our Borough website. So apparently there's a feature on our website about code enforcement related issues that you can report on our Borough page. I think that this is a really nice resource, but going back to like communication, can we somehow start putting out some, did you know that this exists, basically? Because as a member of council, I didn't know. And I found out on social media from a former member of council that this was actually a feature on our website.
Yeah, I can speak into that too. Yeah, absolutely. We have a number of features on our website that I would really love to highlight. And, you know, as we've mentioned earlier in the meeting, now that we finally have a full admin staff, yay! I'm really hoping to be able to spend some more time fully utilizing those things on the website. So one of those things, yeah, there's a code enforcement form you can fill out on the website. There's a police tips form you can fill out on the website. There's also a request form on the website for, well, just a general contact form that you can let the admin office know anything that you'd like to see addressed. One of the things that we're not utilizing yet, but I want to, as I have time, is there's a request tracker, which actually gives residents an opportunity to see how their request is being handled and when it's been completed. So that's something that's, you know, moving forward, I'd really love to see as part of our increased communication with borough residents. So yeah, stay tuned. I will be happy to get that stuff out there and to really show residents all that the website can do for them. Let me put in one more plug for the Notify Me feature of the website. If you have any questions on getting connected to the Notify Me app as part of the website, it's a great feature where you can sign up for whatever you want as far as notifications go from us. You can sign up for notifications via text or email when we post things on the calendar, when we post things for the agenda items for meetings, for community and resident alerts. For example, when the Washington Street Bridge closed, we sent out a Notify Me. People could get emails or text messages right away. This is great for all residents of all ages. You don't even have to have an email address. All you need is a phone number that can receive text messages in order to sign up. So I'd love to put out some information about that as well. Again, as I'm able to create more content, as we've got more staff in place, I'd love to get some more stuff out there so that residents know that that's an available option to them.
Great. All right, let's move on. Public Works. Welcome, Mr. Jordan De Ambrosio. So I'm going to prepare for the Public Works report. Mr. Batchy, just to remind you, if you don't mind, under this umbrella, saying something about Mansion Place that came up in the public comment.
Sure. Jordan, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
I just want to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to be the DPW director. It's been a busy week so far, but I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you.
Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll cover the DPW items.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll just do it in the manager's report if you want to move on to finance.
All right, finance, which we also get to introduce Ms. Vicki Longenecker for finance. So I don't know if Vicki, if you have any feedback or report for us tonight.
I just want to thank everybody for welcoming me to Swissvale, and I'm working well with everyone, and I'm learning the system that is in place, and I really truly enjoy my job.
Welcome, Vicki. Happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't know we had systems in place, but that's good to know.
Well, it's the system that we need to work with, which is QuickBooks, because that's not something that I used in my prior job.
And you had been doing this work for 20, 25 years, I think?
Yes.
Well, we are glad that both you and Jordan are here, and I know probably none are more excited than Mr. Batchy. So,
Absolutely correct.
yeah. So why don't we move to him for the borough manager report?
And I apologize. I have a bunch of items. Apologize in advance. First thing I want to talk about is the building committee report. It was submitted and it'll be with the reports next week that are all sent out to everyone and posted on the website. But the conceptual plan by Core and LSSE for the building and the site are complete. Then that will be supplied to all of council tomorrow as per our earlier discussion. Building committee has been exchanging some emails and correspondence over the last week or two that I will put together, for the committee and the engineers and architects tomorrow, so that tomorrow or Friday, so that everybody's on the same page. There are some different things that members of the committee have brought out and brought forth that we need to address. And the core borings on the site started yesterday. The driller came in and began to drill, and that will help them do it's a subsurface investigation basically, so that they can determine what how to design the footer based upon the soil conditions below grade where they would put the footers. So that's occurring. They said they're going to be here better part all this week and the better part of next week, finishing all the borings. I believe there's 8 total, but they're getting like 1 a day done. So it takes a while for them to do it. And
Oh, Greg, when you get a chance, if that happens to happen while you're around, can you take a picture so we can use that if we want to show like a progression of our process?
yeah, I'll take some pictures tomorrow because they'll be there doing it every day from until the end of next week probably.
Does any of that drilling involve a test bore for possible geothermal, or is this just for the foundation?
This is just for the foundation. If you saw the email I sent out last week to LSSE, they've never given us the estimated additional cost for that, and that will be part of this week's response to them again, that they have not provided that. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell for the building. That was a big thing this week, is the core borings. As everyone's aware, the Washington Street Bridge is closed. The pedestrian access was restored. PennDOT was comfortable, PennDOT's consultant was comfortable that the bridge is safe for people to walk across. They are still conducting their assessment of it. They've done extensive investigation underneath it. They'll be back for more investigation, more assessments, and hopefully in the next few weeks that we'll have an idea of whether or not we can reopen it to traffic, reopen it to traffic with a weight limit, or leave it closed. And we should follow PennDOT's recommendation, whatever it is, because we're not bridge engineers. Their consultants are, and we should definitely follow their lead. So one of the things, we did have a meeting with Norfolk Southern and Port Authority about a week and a half ago, and there were a couple council members present at the meeting where we discussed the replacement of the bridge. And Norfolk Southern is looking to, they are looking to replace the bridge with a new structure, with the caveat, of course. And the caveat was they'll replace it. We can be an integral part of the design team and the design, and the public can be involved in everything. There'll be public meetings and such, and it will be our bridge when it's finished. They want us to take ownership of that bridge. The alternative is they'll build a new bridge with less fluff, without public input, without public comment, and they'll build it to the minimum specifications that PennDOT requires if they have to maintain ownership of it. I don't see. I mean, there are requirements for the substructure and the superstructure. There's engineering standards, and when you say minimum engineering standards, it's not going to fall over. I mean, they're very robust. The minimums, you say the minimum standards, they're very robust standards that you can have a 100,000-pound vehicle travel over it safely if they're with no issue. there are minimum lane widths, there are minimum criteria for sidewalks, crosswalks, the approaches and everything. So, this is council's prerogative, and it's something we need to talk about and decide is, do you want to be in the bridge, own a bridge? In most of our lifetimes, we'll never have an issue with it. We'll never have to deal with it. But do we want to set Swissvale up for 40 to 50 years from now, dealing with the problem like the Borough building that we're dealing with? I don't see a need to do that. If Norfolk Southern owns the bridge, there are design standards that they have to follow by PennDOT with the lane widths, the sidewalks, the approaches, everything else. This is your call, but I don't see. I personally would not recommend that we own a bridge if we don't have to. Now, the one thing Norfolk Southern did say is they may petition the PUC to try to get them to make us take ownership of it. If they do, then we end up with it. That's the PUC's prerogative to do that. But if we just say, yeah, we'll take it, we're stuck with it. We can fight it if it goes to PUC hearing. I would rather go that route than just take it. But this is your call.
And our historical arrangement with them was that we were just responsible for the road surface.
Yes.
Yeah, and can I chime in here because I wasn't aware they were making that demand. The PUC has never made the borough responsible for that bridge or any of the bridges. We've always had responsibility, as Mr. Price just alluded to the sidewalks, to certain surface, cartway. The structure of the bridge itself was always the responsibility of the railroad. And when you see what the cost of these railroad projects are, just look at the Kenmore Bridge. They always try to shift the responsibility to the taxpayers. The notion that Swissvale could actually afford at some point to replace the bridge. And everyone always says, oh, it's so many years in the future. Well, that's what everybody said when the Washington Street Bridge was reconstructed in the late 70s. Oh, well, that's going to be years. Well, here it is. So again, the PUC would be the ultimate arbiter. And if they want to put it before the PUC, then we always have the option. I just don't think the PUC would be particularly sympathetic to them. As I say, I'm just hearing this, and I want to make sure that the former PUC orders that are in place are taken into account. Those are PUC orders that put responsibility on the railroad. It's not that they voluntarily did it. The PUC put it on. So again, I apologize for chiming in. I just think that's important.
No, I appreciate you saying that.
One of the things that came out of that meeting was that the railroad said that if they ordered the steel today, now the bridge hasn't been designed or anything yet, but if they ordered the steel today, it would be 14 months before the steel would even arrive. So we're talking maybe a 3-year window from today by the time we'd have a new bridge.
Right.
And I will also add that Mr. Price asked, I think, a very good question in that, which was because the original offer was basically, we'll build a new bridge if you'll take ownership of it. And Mr. Price clarified, if we don't take ownership of it, and they said we'd still build a new bridge. So that is not the condition of the building of the new bridge, but it is what they would want out of that.
There's no harm in asking, but
sure.
So would it be council's wishes to make this an agenda item for next week to take a vote to determine if we would accept ownership of the bridge?
Yeah, why don't we let Ms. Salisbury chime in real quick, and then we'll try to get that.
So I just wanted to know that when I was at that meeting where we had a meeting with Norfolk Southern and so forth, and so when the folks from the railroad were there, they seemed like they were really, really, really trying to make it seem very attractive for us to own the bridge, which makes me think it is an unattractive proposition for us to own the bridge. Because if it were so I felt like it was like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, and Tom Sawyer convinces all the kids that it's really fun to paint a fence. So they'll do it for him. So I felt like that's kind of what they were doing. They were leaning really hard on us, like, oh, well, it would be so great for you to have your own input on the design, and it would be your bridge and that sort of thing. And they claim that they've convinced some other communities to do this, and everything is fine and dandy. But to me, we have a bunch of, as people have mentioned already, we have a bunch of once in a generation projects here right now, where we have the Borough building, we have a DPW facility, we have this bridge, we have all these things that are happening all at once. And I just don't want us to set up whatever the future iteration of us will be for also getting slammed with all of these projects at the same time. And I mean, we could be looking like it could be like a $5 million bridge in the way that we have to redo the Borough building right now. And frankly, I don't really care. Like, they wanted us to talk about, oh, well, if you want to put decorative statues on the bridge or whatever, guess what? I'd rather it be free and then we not have to deal with it and it can be ugly. I mean, that's how I feel about it. I really don't care what it looks like as long as we aren't financially responsible for it. It's not that appealing to me to know like what color paint we're putting on the hideous bridge so that, we can nominally have some ownership over it. And they tried to really make it seem like, oh, well, we'll really rake you over the coals with the PUC. Like, it'll take a year just to get through the PUC process. And my only experience with PUC has been trucking, so I don't really know what that process is like. But they tried to make it seem like it would take forever. They're like, well, it'll take a year just to get the steel and another year on top of that to deal with the PUC. So it'll go on and on and on. So to me, the fact they make it try to seem really appealing to own the bridge for us is a sign that we don't want that bridge.
Alfonso Wells.
I don't think there's ever been a time when someone's tried to sell you a bridge or give you a bridge that's ever been a good idea. In addition, it doesn't have
Swampland in Florida.
Right, exactly. It doesn't have to be steel. It could be concrete. I mean, if you look at the Fern Hollow Bridge, and you see why they're building that with the concrete right now. And the place that manufactures that kind of concrete, I guess, is actually relatively close by. So, I probably wouldn't go with the steel beam. It doesn't even matter, right? I don't think us owning a bridge is probably a good idea. I don't even think I have to vote on it because I just know that we should not be owning a bridge. We have trouble trying to build a borough building. So we definitely don't want a bridge under our belts.
I mean, I think to all of that, let's put it on the agenda next week to vote on, because I think that if we're all against it, I would imagine, again, Mr. Batcher, Mr. McTiernan can weigh in, but I think it's a very strong statement, if not just that we don't take action on it, but that we take action and have a unanimous nay vote. I think shows pretty clearly where our hand is on that.
Mr. President.
Yeah, Mr. Wellham, go ahead.
If I may, just from some institutional knowledge, being that I was the manager that dealt with the Kenmore Bridge replacement, similar bridge to what is on Washington Street, that was a $17 million project.
Wow.
To put it into perspective.
Yeah, we're not talking $5 million bridge, I suppose. And if it's 40 years from now, who knows where that'll be with inflation. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that info. Mr. Batchy, anything else you need from us for that?
Not for that, no. But I have a bunch of other stuff.
Okay.
So for next month's meeting, we will be advertising an ordinance to extend the life of the Wilkinsburg Penn Joint Water Authority. So that will be an action item for next month's meeting. Covered the bridge, the Schroyer Monongahela Avenue intersection that we talked about last month, and I believe every year on the same month. Looked into this a little bit. We talked about putting mirrors up or something, to try to help the traffic situation. There's no poles that would work for a mirror to make it actually worthwhile to put it there. So I think the only option here would be we change that stop sign coming up Monongahela, turning right onto Schroyer. That's it. Right now it's posted stop except right turn. We would draft an ordinance, pass an ordinance to say that there's, it's a full stop sign. So that would alleviate the problem looking right, because you would have people stopping there. Now we would need, for quite a long period of time, I think, some advance warning, that says all traffic must stop, new traffic pattern, all traffic must stop, and put it on the sign too, to warn people, and maybe even some enforcement from the police or something, them sitting there for when they have a chance. But I think that is our best option. And if you'd like me to move forward with that, I could work with Mr. McTiernan to draft an ordinance to do that.
Any thoughts?
Yes.
Yes, please. I'm tired of the shrubbery causing traffic problems.
I always stop there anyway and get yelled at by my wife. So
On
no
your way to
change
Dairy
for me.
Delight.
That's right. On the way to Dairy Delight, I always stop there.
That intersection is always taking a wing and a prayer, trying to get through it from Shoyer, trying to go straight to get to Monongahela. Always feel like I have to like take a prayer and press the gas because you can never get, it's just dangerous. And I'm surprised there aren't more accidents there. So although, I always, now, mostly myself to blame, I can't make a right at the light at the street anymore, because of course we want to keep our kids safe. When I'm coming down Monongahela, I can't make a right onto Shoyer at the red light. I particularly loved being able to do that, but I can no longer do that. So if we just stop it all up and just put stop signs there so you can no longer freely do anything, it will keep our neighborhood safe.
Yep. Sounds like you've got enough yeses. Let's move forward with it.
Okay. Civil Service Commission met on Monday to certify the list for police officers, for police patrolmen and sergeants. They certified the list of 2 sergeants who passed the exam, and we did send out an email to all of council and the mayor that there will be an interview. There's interviews scheduled. I believe it's August 17th at 6 and 6:30 with those 2 candidates. And then we would look to appoint someone at the September council meeting. The patrolmen, they certified a list of 4 candidates for patrol, and the chief and Sergeant Corrado are in the process of conducting the background checks. Once the background checks come back, if everything's good, then we will ask council to schedule a date to interview. It'll be the top 3 because you're only allowed to hire out of the top 3. So we would ask council to interview the top 3 candidates, and we would like to try to do that before the next council meeting at some point. The county will be baiting for rabies baiting for raccoon rabies they're starting on Monday. So this is something for the public to watch out for. They will be dropping these baits around the borough and all of Allegheny County by hand and by airplane. So if am I able to share my screen? Yeah. If you see, can everybody see that? Can you see the
Yes, I can see it.
So this is what the oral rabies baits look like for the raccoons, and they claim that they're gone within 5 days of the baiting. I don't know what attracts the raccoons to them, but apparently there's something very attractive to them. So now, if you have your dogs outside or your other animals, try to keep them, if you see any of these, keep the animals away from it. You may want to keep your dogs inside or on a shorter leash for next week, week to 10 days, because these go away in 10 days, but they said they'll be doing it through the 5th. So you may want to keep your dogs inside or outside, or walk your yard and look for these. And when you're walking your dog, try to keep it on a leash close to you so they don't pick any of these up. If you touch them, use a glove or something. They advise you to wash your hands if you come into contact with it. So that will be occurring next week in all of Allegheny County. The one other thing is for the if you've driven past the Borough building, you saw there's a large pile of tires back there, probably 200 plus tires there. Those were actually dumped there between Saturday and Sunday. So Chief Watson and Detective Sergeant Corrado are investigating. They're trying to see if they can get some camera footage from if there's people across the street or at the auto parts of Masters Hardware that have cameras that saw a vehicle coming in and out. But those were dropped off sometime in a 24-hour period, and they're all stacked very neatly. So we're going to see if we can find out who did it and charge them appropriately and have them remove them. But if we can't find it, we'll end up removing them because they're a mosquito hazard. Last thing I have is to respond to the Mansion Place, is back under Public Works. Did talk to, Mr. Wagner came to the council meeting, I think in February. He said that he came to the meeting. You know, and I did say that we would try to have something done over there late spring, early summer. Just with the lack of personnel, I was unable to get that done with the, you know, and I'm talking office personnel because there are a number of other things. But we will make some repairs there. There's one concrete slab that needs removed and replaced, and we will make those repairs this year. You know, I just don't know the time frame, but I mean, we have in the next couple months we'll get somebody to do that work on Mansion Place that I promised would be done. And like I said, I did say late spring, early summer. I'm sorry I wasn't able to meet that, but you know, we will get it done this year.
Great, thanks, Mr. Batchy. Ms. Scales.
Thank you. Sorry to hold us any longer, you guys, but I'm trying to do better with my communication, so it takes up time. Greg, is there any kind of way we can consider active shooter training for our admin staff now that we are fully staffed and you have all new people? Maybe the admin should undergo some active shooter training.
We can absolutely do that.
Oh, Chief.
Can I comment on this real quick? Detective Sergeant Corrado has been certified in ALICE training, which is we did with the school districts and all the teachers for Woodland Hills and the schools in Swissvale. So we'd be more than happy to do that training for the admin staff.
Wonderful.
Thank you. And I know we have discussed the sensitivity training for everybody. If we could, now that you have a full staff, if we could get back to arranging that for us.
I will do that.
And I have been getting a lot of comments about traffic congestion issues now that the Washington Bridge is closed. I know that we spoke about this and you said that someone you had to reach out to in regards to maybe fixing the light on Braddock to improve traffic congestion.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had that on my list and I missed that. At Church in South Braddock, especially where there's a lot of traffic congestion down there now because of the bridge being closed. And I did reach out to Gibson Thomas Engineering. They're the firm that we've used for traffic engineering in the past. And I did talk to them on Wednesday of last week. And they followed up with PennDOT, and PennDOT is requiring an amended traffic signal permit, which I instructed Gibson Thomas to move forward on, because what I would like them to do is, so when you're coming like from the Valero station going westbound down underneath the underpass, so that there's an advanced green signal on facing westbound, so you can make the turn onto Church Street and clear. There's usually during the day now and during rush hour, there's usually 5 or 6 cars trying to make a left turn onto Church Street. And I mean, one day I sat there for 3 cycles myself before I moved up to the front, was able to go through. So what they are doing is they're going to amend the traffic permit, the signal permit, to change the timing on those lights. But PennDOT is requiring that we install a light with an arrow there. So there will be a cost involved. Now we do have about a dozen traffic signals in the basement of the old Borough building that came out of Woodstock Avenue. If any of those will work, we'll just install one of those. It would replace the one that's on the pole. If you're going down the hill, the one to the left, we would use those in place. I do also know of a place that also has some used signals. If we don't have them, we may be able to get one cheaply or for free to do that. But as soon as we get the amendment, we'll get the equipment installed, because he's going to get back to me this week to tell me what equipment we need, and I'll see if we have it. And we'll have our we'll have S&S Traffic Systems come out. They're the company we use for traffic light repairs. So they could swap out the signals as soon as the permit approval is approved. And Mr. Miller at PennDOT, Ed Miller at PennDOT, said he would expedite the permit for us. It's usually about a 30 to 45 day process, but he said, given the circumstances, he would definitely expedite it, and so that we get that change made. Because I don't think this is going to be a short-term project here. And even if the bridge is reopened, I think a left turn, an advanced left turn there permanently is a good idea, because you sit down there for a long time anyway, just under normal circumstances, let alone under these new circumstances.
In the meantime, during peak hours, is it possible to have one of our Swissville police officers out there to direct traffic to try to improve the flow of traffic? Uh-oh.
Keith, do you want to take this?
I'm sorry, at the intersection, which intersection you cut out?
Church and South Braddock.
Church and South Braddock.
So
I mean, the only problem is it's like multiple intersections, and it takes two officers usually to direct traffic at Waverly and Church and Edgewood, that intersection. And the problem I see is traffic's backing up at the South Braddock and Waverly intersection, and then it's backing up below that. So
one of the things though too is if there was an officer there, though, they could direct to keep the people out of the intersection, even if it's backed up from Waverly down the hill. They could keep the people back behind the Church Street intersection, so people going down the hill could make that left onto Church, because a lot of people, I know, they just run through the intersection, they just stop right in the middle of it, and then they're not going anywhere, but then the people turning left can't go anywhere either.
is there specific times we're looking at? Is it more rush hour or?
Yeah.
I know when
rush hour.
Yeah, when I leave work around 4, it's starting to back up.
Yeah, I see that too. All right, I will take a look at it and I will let you know, and we'll do something with it.
And another thing I've been told, because with our power outages, the traffic signals go out, and that creates an issue with traffic as well. So is there something we can do to be proactive? Like, can our police go out and direct traffic in those instances as well?
Typically what we do is we call Public Works and they come out and put up stop signs, because the number of intersections that are typically are more than we have people working. I mean, if it's like a major intersection, we have of course done that. And we do as much as we can, but we try to get stop signs out as quickly as we can to deal with that.
Yeah, the state actually has grant funding available. There's a round of funding available that goes from now through the end of September. And I was going to bring this forward next month to do a resolution to submit a grant application. They have 2 programs. One's called the Sync program. One's called the Sync Up program. Under the Sync program, you can replace traffic controllers, and the new traffic controllers all have battery backups in them, because I don't know if you noticed, when the power's out in town, the traffic signal at Waverly and Edgewood and South Braddock still works, because that has a battery backup in it. The rest of them don't, because they didn't have the technology back then for the battery backups. So we can apply for all new traffic controllers along the South Braddock corridor, which we would probably want to do with Edgewood, so that do a joint grant so that we could get them all replaced and synced. But the other thing too is, you can also apply through that program for to replace traffic signals at intersections, like we did at Waverly, and just redo all the signals, the controller and everything. So I'd recommend we do a couple projects there. We do have a grant application we submitted to the automated red light enforcement program to replace all the signals at Schroyer and Monongahela, and also install pedestrian signals there. So we have a grant application pending for that. So we can look at the South Braddock corridor and see what would make sense there. So that is on the radar for next month.
And then one last traffic related issue. Ellesmere has barriers, and those barriers have been there for a minute, and that's creating traffic from Braddock as well. Can those barriers be removed?
Are those the barriers around that building at the corner of Ellesmere and South Braddock?
So the look that I have, it doesn't look like it's around the building. Well, yeah, it does. Yep.
Yeah, we installed those because the building, the facade on the building is falling off, and we installed them to keep people off the sidewalk and keep people from parking there, so their property and their lives aren't injured or the property damaged. I know code enforcement's been trying to go after them, and they've just been ignoring them. So I don't know what the status of that is. I see Chief Wilhelm just clicked on.
Yes, the property's been sold. We actually have application for building permit that's been approved recently. So they're going to be rehabbing that apartment building and repairing that falling facade. But there was also barricades installed in that same block today because an overnight truck came through and ripped down about a dozen wires crossing the street.
Oh, is that where?
So
That's
we
what
just
there were
we
some
just put
white.
barricades up today to stop traffic from driving through and getting entangled in the wires until Verizon and Comcast arrive to be able to take care of that issue.
So those should be addressed hopefully by the end of the week then.
Okay. Okay. I'm glad something's happening with that property, because I remember when I was knocking on doors, the house next to it, that's one thing she asked if we could do something about that.
Well, we've been working on it and we have a good resolution coming forward. So.
All right, let's go to Mr. Price.
I don't know why, but traffic has increased a lot on Noble Street since the bridge closed. And when you try to get out of Noble Street onto South Braddock Avenue, that light only stays green long enough to maybe let 3 cars out. It looks like it's only active for about 10 seconds. So I was going to say that if we're looking at these various intersections, maybe we should look at the timing of that light to get off of Waverly onto South Braddock Avenue. And I've been here long enough to remember when there was no turning lane on South Braddock Avenue when you wanted to turn onto Church Street at the time that the railroad bridge was only about 11 feet high. And as a private citizen, I went after the Port Authority and begged them when they were building the new bridge to make that wider and create that turning lane. And so thank God we have it, but it used to be that traffic would back up the whole way up through the Waverly Street intersection every time one person wanted to turn onto Church Street, because that was only one lane in each direction.
I can definitely talk to them about, see what the implication would be if they change the timing at that intersection also. And that would be a permit revision too. Anytime you change the signals, it would be a permit revision, but I'm sure they could expedite that for us also.
Thank you.
Ms. Alfonso Wells.
Sorry, took a second to find the mic. We are having our national night out, I think this Tuesday. And I don't remember if we were able to get our permit. I know that usually goes to the office and Mr. Wilhelm, and I hope we get to see our firefighters and some of our police officers. We always like doing that. It's a fan favorite in our neighborhood to have the folks come out. There will be food for those of you who do manage to come out and see us. And we know who the crew are because we see you every time. And we have good food. So for those of my favorite firefighters and police officers that like to stop by and play with the kids and give out those little hats or whatever it is that they do and give us a tour of the fire truck, we appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you. And if one of us forgot to get the permit, I hope it wasn't me that was supposed to get the permit, please let me know. So I can get that permit before Tuesday. But I don't think that was my responsibility.
No, it's good. I mean, permit application was submitted. We'll deliver the barricades and cones sometime Tuesday afternoon. So
excellent. It should be a great thing. And I'm so glad that I finally, after living here for, oh my goodness, a little under 20 years, the first couple of years, they never invited me, and we would look and we could see Hayes is like literally right in front of my house. And we were like, man, they're having a party. Why are they not inviting us? And finally we got invited. And so now we are permanent fixtures, but wow, that was an awful feeling. So any of my neighbors on Schroyer or Hayes or anybody in that little section over there, or anybody that just wants to stop by, we're gonna have food trucks and we're gonna have fire trucks. And hopefully some of our police officers can come over. It'll be a wonderful thing. We always have a good time, and we invite you as our neighbors to come be neighborly with us.
Don't judge me. I like to pop up at various night out block
No judgment, and you will be welcome.
and socialize and eat. I specifically like Denise's block.
Well, Denise's block is my block, but not exactly. So,
So I'll be showing up.
Mr. Batchy, do you have anything else for us tonight?
That's all I have.
All right. The only thing I'm going to say is just ARPA survey, reminding everyone that that closes August 15th at noon. So get your feedback in for that survey. I was on the website and on the newsletter. And let's go to the solicitor report.
Mr. President, I'll be very brief and maybe not to belabor the point, but not only are there existing PUC orders that limit the borough's responsibility for the Washington Street Bridge, one of the major differences in the equities, if the matter went to the PUC between when the bridge was last reconstructed and today, is now the busway, which passes under the bridge, is a major factor and a major component of the Port Authority's transportation system. So if the railroad's looking for relief or cost sharing, it should go in the direction of the Port Authority or some of the other parties rather than the borough. So I think we could stay out of the PUC, but if we go before the PUC, we have plenty of very good arguments to maintain our current responsibilities only. So that's all I have this evening.
Great, thanks. That's encouraging. New business, item 6. Any new business? Yes, Ms. Scales.
Try to be brief. Sorry, you guys. I just want to say the Edible Garden Tour was a success. Thanks to all the organizers for that tour. It was not only a good outing for our Swissville residents, but it attracts folks from outside of Swissville to come into Swissville. One thing I'd like us to look into, although our humble organizers never asked us for anything other than to market the event, is maybe when it comes to budget planning, maybe we could put aside some funding to support that initiative, because it's been proven to be a success and it's been proven to be beneficial to our community. So maybe we can put aside some funding to support them every year towards their efforts. And then the last item I'd like to state as the vice president of council, because I don't get a section, and most of the time Chris hits on everything anyway for me not to say, but I'd like for us as member of council to do a better job with setting the tone. Setting the tone in terms of professionalism and respectability amongst each other. I'd like to think and believe that from our actions and how we engage, that sets the tone throughout the community, that we are not adversaries, but we are colleagues, and we are merely trying to collaborate and work together for the benefit of our community. And I really think that we've been doing a poor job in setting the tone in terms of professionalism and respect amongst each other. So if the words that are coming my mouth mean anything to you, if we could set the tone and do a better job so that it would then transcend into the community, I greatly appreciate it.
Great, thanks so much for those comments. And I mean, I just echo that there is a lot of respect that is shared amongst, we don't always agree, but there's a lot of respect shared amongst the different members of council. And I do think that it's important for the community to see that, even though there might be places where we do disagree, that we do so respectfully, and we're all working for the betterment of this borough, the best way that we know how. Well, on those comments, let's, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second it.
I'm gonna second that.
Motion to adjourn.
There we go. Someone moved, a couple people seconded. Let's all in favor, please say aye of adjourning at 10:14 p.m.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? See y'all in a week.
Ciao.